All right, everyone, we have the signal that we are ready to begin. Oh, excuse me. So I'm going to call this meeting of the Washington County School District Board of Trustees Policy Committee, Board Policy Committee, to order, and we will start with our roll call. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. President Taylor.
I'm here.
Vice President Nicolette.
Good afternoon.
Trustee Smith. She is delayed.
Yes. She may be joining us later via Zoom.
I gotta find her spot. Trustee Rodriguez. Here. Trustee Mayberry. Here. Trustee Church.
Here.
Oh, and I'm here too. And we have a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We're going to go ahead and jump right into it and go to agenda item 2.01. This is approval of minutes from the June 21st, 22 Board Policy Committee meeting, which was the last time we met. Is it the 21st? Yeah, that was the last time we met. Any public comment on this, America?
There is no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. And America, welcome to your first policy meeting, board policy meeting. You always do so much stuff behind the scenes and do a lot of things for us, so thank you. Get a chance to thank you on the record. And to our superintendent, welcome to your first board policy committee meeting.
Thank you, Madam President.
You're welcome. More for America. She's been here longer. She's done more for us. So
That's true.
Sorry. Priorities. Sorry.
Understood.
But, okay. Okay. Good. All right. So looking to no public comment. Looking for a motion, if that's the pleasure of the board, to approve the minutes from our June 21st, 2022 meeting. Okay. So I heard Trustee Rodriguez will take that and seconded by Clerk Minetto. Discussion. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition. All right, the motion carries. Let the record show that it is unanimous. On to 2.02, and right on cue, I see our Chief HR Officer is coming. This is discussion. Excuse me. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forwarding the proposed revisions to the revisions of Board Policy 7300, risk management, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And I see, we have two guests in front of us. So, Ms. Ellison, we'll just start with you.
Yes, please. Thank you, President Taylor. Emily Ellison, Chief Human Resources Officer for the record. I'm joined today by my colleague and our district's risk manager, Mr. Brandon Perry. And I'm going to cover most of the information today because this is also Brandon's first policy meeting, but I'm sure you'll be seeing more of him in the future. So,
well, welcome, and I think that's good. Okay, we'll see more of you. Okay, so yeah, we'll go with that. Okay, we'll go with that. We'll go with that. Welcome.
In a good way, yes.
Yes.
So the vast majority of the changes to this policy are to conform with formatting and language conventions that have been previously adopted by the Board of Trustees. We'll go ahead and walk through the policy just so I can highlight some of the changes that were made. In the purpose statement, you'll see the addition of the words "of loss" after risks, intended to provide some additional clarification that our role is to protect the district against the risks of loss versus all risks. We've moved the definitions to the top for formatting consistency. In Section 1, we modified some language to improve clarity and readability, but no material change to the meaning results from those changes.
So if I may, since this is the first
Sure.
policy committee for our superintendent, will you talk a little bit about what's in red, what's in blue, so it's easy for her to follow as she sees it before her?
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
If you would.
So many of the changes in red in the purpose statement are to, again, follow the formatting conventions.
Oh no, just so the red things are things that we.
Okay.
That, right, you know what I mean, and then
Okay.
the blue things are, and then when it's struck out, that just.
Okay, gotcha.
Is that more clear?
I think so.
All right.
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud. Thanks.
All right.
Second day of school. Here we go.
Madam President.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Do
Clerk
we
Minetto?
ask questions as we go, or?
You certainly can.
I think so, yes, absolutely. So
Wait.
please go ahead. No, go
Okay,
ahead.
I have I'm probably really being weird about this, but in 1A, the word reasonable is bothering me because it's not measurable. And it may be perfectly reasonable to have the word reasonable there. But I think it's a matter of somebody's opinion what reasonable is. So I don't.
And can you tell us where you are, Clerk Minetto, so we can follow 1A?
It is
right there.
1A.
Okay. All right. Got you. So your recommendation, or just we're at the second line, at the beginning of the second line, everyone, in case you haven't seen, district to make reasonable efforts. There's something legally about that. Counsel, if you would.
Yeah, so when you're adopting standards, you have to look at the reasonable person standard. So who is this person? What you look at as an objective standard, what's reasonable and what's not. So when you're looking at risk and negligence and liabilities related there too, negligence in general is you have a duty, a breach of that duty, which causes some injury to someone, right? So what you look at is what is the duty, and then what was the action that caused the breach? Would a reasonable person believe that that was the problem? And that's why you use the word reasonable. So that's actually that's a legal term of art. I do agree with you, it's difficult, but that's what lawyers get paid for. So.
Okay, thank you.
So I think job security was the response to that.
Why don't you try to make it,
Yeah. No,
try to make it sound better?
okay. Sorry. Does that answer that for you, though? Because
Yes,
there's a legal definition. Okay. Good question. Please go ahead.
Excellent. In section 1B, you'll see that we struck the word various to just clarify district offices, divisions, and departments. In section 2A, the word staff was changed to employees, again for formatting consistency. In 3A, we made that same editorial change to reference offices, divisions, and departments, consistent with the change in section B of the first section.
So if I may, then what I'm looking for in this, so the things that we see in blue, Madam Superintendent, are just additional words, and things that are in red are words that she's changed, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
Am I, or that have helped?
Yeah, so
we can,
what we do is we use the red lines track changes that is found in Word. So what'll happen is Emily's team will make edits, and that'll pop up as a certain color, either blue or red, and then our team will make edits, and that'll pop up in the opposite color. So this is two
yours
different
versus
offices
theirs.
working together,
okay.
and then any strikeouts are things that we're removing, and so the colors are just different offices.
Okay, not
and sometimes
so
you'll see
even though-
3 or 4 because it'll be multiple offices working on.
I was trying to pull it from here, and it looked like it was that change, but that
Right.
makes more sense. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. In section 3, you'll see that we've changed the reference from previously it was staff. Originally we said employees, but then after Brandon and I had some additional conversation about it and reading the intent of this, it really seemed more appropriate to this at administrators, who then risk manager, to execute programs and events and whatever in the appropriate way to mitigate risk. In that same section, 3C, you'll see that the last sentence, resource issues related to the participation by schools and departments, will be addressed. We did a fair amount of research and brainstorming and thinking, and really couldn't come up with what that was intended to mean or how it was related to this section. So we recommended to strike that. We've used some convention in terms of referring to the Department of Risk Management in section 4. And then in section 4A, you'll see that there previously was a reference to a risk management safety committee. That information has been struck from the policy for a couple of reasons. First, the functions outlined are duplicative of work that the risk manager and the employees assigned to risk management are responsible for doing. It also had a reference to the role of the committee in maintaining the board policy, which is not the role of our board committees. And then there's certainly nothing that precludes us from pulling together a stakeholder group as needed and convening a stakeholder group as needed. But the work, the very specific nature of this work, in our opinion, do not rise to the level of creation of another board committee. So we struck references to that, and you'll see that the content and the responsibility for the tasks that were outlined are are indicated as a responsibility of the department and the risk manager in the new text in green.
My understanding, if I may, is I don't remember even having a board risk and safety committee. So that's one, which is why we make sure we review these all the time, because that's okay.
Yep, it's been a while. Let's see, the last one for this
Do you,
one was
Dr. Dye?
2015.
No. Okay. Excuse me.
The remainder of the deletions are consistent with formatting convention and the changes that the board adopted for board policy formatting.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Diane?
Yes, thank you. And I like when we make these more brief. I think that's really important from a policy standpoint. Back to page 1, this is just a note of importance. Under the policy, number 1A, where it refers to employees, volunteers, students, student families, visitors are expected to know and adhere to. Just a note of importance on my part is that the administrative regulations, I believe, should make that very clear about to know, because that involves a lot of people, and it is important that we all know. Just a note of importance.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Nicolette. Do we have any public comment on this? And I'll go to Trustee Church.
We do not.
Thank you, America. Trustee Church?
Thank you a lot. I spent a lot of time on this, and in my previous life, this was something I dealt with on a regular basis, and obviously things change. And I'm so glad we have counsel here to help us on this. The first thing is really simple and small. It uses the word accidents. In my career, an accident was an unplanned happening, resulting in injury or damage, et cetera.
Can you direct us to where you are, Trustee Church?
I'm sorry, right at the beginning, I think it's 1A, under safety. Let me find it here.
Yeah, second line.
Second line.
Okay, thank you. I looked through a lot of policies, and based on my experience, we might want to look at changing that word to incident. Lots of different definitions of incident, but an incident basically is, in the handout that I gave you, it's a negative event. It's an occurrence, condition, or situation arising from the course of work, which, by the way, in here I believe it said somewhere about on school property. Liability can occur off school property involving school employees, resulting or could have resulted, and that's important, in injuries, illness, damage to health facilities, or liability. Just a example. Employee goes up on a ladder. He or she's up pretty high, changing a light bulb. They fall down. The ladder comes out. Everybody's fine. You go, I'm fine. I'm okay. That's still an incident, not an accident, because nobody was hurt. Where we might go, from now on, we're going to have a policy that somebody holds the ladder. You know, so it's probably a need to change the definition. I could give other examples, but sometimes if something goes wrong and nobody's hurt, but we say, hey, this is a risk thing we got to fix.
So your recommendation then, please, on this
The
one?
recommendation,
I think I know what it is, but
the recommendation would be to change accident to incident and then define incident.
in definitions?
Yes.
Okay. Comments, others, because we'll take them as we go
I might ask legal, perhaps.
through this. Ask.
Legal, Mr. Lombardo, if I'm correct.
I'm right now checking out NRS 41 to look at immunity, our immunities, and try to. I can't answer that right yet.
Okay.
Let me do a little digging.
Yeah.
But go
I
ahead.
can move on, and we can come back to
Well,
that.
I don't.
I can provide a little bit of color about
Well, yeah.
the word choice as well.
I'm sorry. You want to comment on this?
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of color about the word choice.
Okay.
When we're thinking about this policy in the context of risk management and thinking about definitions, while I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think there should be guidance that near misses or incidents should still be reported and accounted for, I think accident really captures kind of the intent of mitigating loss through risk management.
Well, let me ask a question, if I might, then. Second
Let's
example.
get your mic on. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Second example, a visitor to property, say during the ping pong tournament, says the school district ping pong coach assaulted me in the bathroom, and there was no accident. It was an intentional act, allegedly. So, and this is one I kind of want to cover because it affects elsewhere in the policy. That's not an accident. There's certainly liability. There's certainly risk management where we might have to change policies, but that's not an accident. Can you address that?
Okay, well, we're having conversation, so that's just another way to think about it. Not necessarily an address, but it's something else to consider. Trustee Rodriguez? Thank you, Trustee Church.
Thank you, Madam President. Kind of elaborating a little bit more on school district property, which I understand, but what about the staff that regularly goes between different school locations if they get in an accident, or school bus drivers, or because are they covered under umbrella, or is it specifically for school district property?
Can you point out where you see
1A.
that? Sorry.
That was part of the one of the
District
comments that Trustee Church said was that it mentioned school property, but we know our staff extends beyond the actual building of the right. What might be a school bus is probably school property, I would imagine. Perhaps I don't know what the legal.
Well, I think too in this context, it's about our ability to make reasonable efforts to minimize, right? So our facilities are in our care and custody, whereas if our employees are going to another place, we can make reasonable efforts with our property that's within our control, but we don't necessarily have control over other entities.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, makes sense.
Can I address that? Or?
Thank you. You'd like to comment on that? Sure, Trustee Church.
Yeah, again, I just respectfully disagree because I ran into a truancy officer the other day, just saw the school, hey, who are you? Nice to meet you. They were alone. So what if
they were
alone?
Alone.
So what if there was an incident where they're in a house and something goes haywire? And now we may want to say, and there's certainly liability there, and it's not school property. So I just don't think that fits the intent is to cover risk management, not risk management on school property, risk management. And again, there might be discussion, I'm sure there has been. From now on, truancy officers will go in pairs of two,
Yeah, on that one, I would see, but this specifically isn't about reducing risk management, period. It's about reducing the accidents / incidents, whatever, minimizing accidents or right now it's accidents of students, employees, and yada, yada, even whether we change the incidents or not on school property, not risk management as a whole. That to me, that's a little bit, I can kind of feel a little bit about what Emily is saying, because I don't think we want to say that we are responsible for the condition of another place that we cannot control because our students are on a field trip or whatever the case may be, and then someone trips on the sidewalk outside of it. That's outside of what we are responsible for, and if we put that in the policy, we're saying we are responsible for that.
And also this section specifically is about safety and controlling the physical environment.
Right. That as a whole, yes, we want to minimize risk. We're concerned about risk management as a whole. Period. You're absolutely. I don't disagree with that at all. But the specifics of this seem to speak a little bit differently, and I don't know that we want to put in writing. I would be concerned about putting in writing and saying that that we want to minimize accidents or incidents that can happen. Period. With the student. That's a little broad and just we can't control it.
And
so I'd be concerned about that.
I think Section 2 might also address some of those types of things, right? So Section 2A5, preventing and controlling risk through training and supervision. If we identify truancy officers visiting homes solo as an area of risk, which I think you're right to bring that up, then I think this section is meant to clarify that it is incumbent upon the risk manager and risk management department to address those concerns.
Okay, Dr. Nicolette, we're on the same topic before we bounce on. I know you have your light on, but I think you're on something else, Clerk Manetto? Are you on this topic, this specific thing that we're talking about, or somewhere else in the policy?
Incidents, accidents.
Okay, so pause on that for a minute.
Yes.
Let's stay right here with
Okay.
this piece. Go ahead, Dr. Nicolette, and then we'll come back to
I
you.
think the discussion, to me, shows a need to have a definition. I've just a very quick one. It's certainly, I don't believe it's legal, but an incident is any unexpected event that does not result in serious losses or injury. And I don't know from your perspective, Brandon, if that's how you view it. An accident is an unexpected event that causes damage, injury, or harm. So given this conversation, I wonder if maybe we should add a definition. When we get into the nuances, which I think Trustee Church has brought up some interesting examples, I believe that's where it needs to be addressed in the administrative regulations. This is a broad overarching, we know that. But we might need to have some definitions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nicola. What I was trying to do was stay on as we paused a minute on incident accidents, but stay really more on the on-school property versus off-of-school property piece. Oh, no, that's okay, because we kind of paused so that council would have a chance to take a look at some things. But hold your thought, because that is part of the conversation. Do we change the wording and then include with a definition based upon that to make it clear? So just staying on the on-school property versus off of school property, because we paused the other one. Everybody with me so far? Everybody with me good now?
Yes.
Okay, so on that on-school property versus not versus excluding that piece, that's the piece we're trying to get our arms around, because we'll vote on each of these as we go if they're recommended changes. Trustee Rodriguez? She's on incidents and accidents.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm kind of on the same, but I do, like, from law enforcement standpoint, I understand what what an accident is on a plan of blah, 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 an incident, and so I guess I would suggest why not add incidents and/or accidents.
Yeah, it could be incident/accidents on that. So
that way, the general public would kind of have a little bit of a better understanding versus getting into the legal,
Okay. I think we're going to go back to that point. There's not much more conversation on the on the school property piece or not. So it stays as it is so far, as it is, unless there's more conversation. Doesn't seem like there is more. So
I just respectfully disagree, because again, I could come up with a lot of examples. We had a meeting at the Nugget, a school board meeting of some type. I don't remember exactly what it was now, but even though that's not our property, we have certain risk management about our security, not falling down on a crack, but we still have responsibility for employees or incidents off school property where we, like that example, like the Nugget.
Okay. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're back to incidents and accidents, because there's nothing else there. We can keep circling it and say it 45 different ways, but there's just not much else there right now, Trustee Church. So we're back to incidents and accidents, and so there's the recommendation that perhaps we include both incidents and/or incidents / depending. Clerk Manetto?
I would concur with that. And also, other things that were mentioned about a coach beating a kid up, that's a whole different place.
Process.
That's assault. It's illegal. There's all kinds of things that wouldn't fall under risk management, right? Thank you.
Please. Brandon, you want to check?
I think the short answer is risk management definitely gets involved because of liability and our insurance and all of that. But you're right, those kind of specific situations or circumstances are often addressed in other venues like statute or other policies.
Mm-hmm. And one thing to remember too, this specific policy is risk management as a whole, but it doesn't mean everything that risk management may be involved in is going to be in this policy, such as what you said. Some things are criminal, some things fall in other areas, and they're still included. Counsel?
Yeah, I looking at the research, and Trustee Nicolette was able to provide me a website about work definitions related to risk management on these two terms. It is interesting. It appears on that website, who drafts policies related to this, that an incident is something lesser than an accident, which I was surprised by. So I don't have a legal opinion on this. I would defer to the experts of risk management. The only part, if we wanted to look at more legalese, is NRS 41 provides our immunities for liability. It states acts or omissions. So if we wanted to get technical and follow statute, I don't know how it would read very well, but I have thought of to minimize acts or omissions to students, employees, and the general public. And then we'd have to put a clause right there that says that results in, and then go back up to the top where our purpose is, and say unanticipated and unintended losses. So, but, we could do it that way, and that might solve everyone's problem. I'm not sure. I don't have a recommendation on this. I really don't.
Go ahead, Brandon.
So I would defer to the expert.
So I just wanted to add for,
Just give us your name for the record, Brandon.
I'm sorry, Brandon Perry, Risk Manager.
Thank you.
Just to speak to the accident versus incident, there's a lot of different definitions online that you can look up, and I don't know which is the appropriate one to use, but in looking at accidents, I would say accidents defined are an unplanned happening, and it's from the perspective of the district, not of the person that is the actor. So from the perspective of the district, if something does occur, we deem it as an unplanned happening or an accident because from our perspective, it's unplanned. We didn't know that it was going to happen. So if you want to define it, you can put it into the board policy that way instead of broadening it to contain both incident and or accident.
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, if a teacher commits an intentional act, that's still an unplanned, an intentional harmful act. That's still an unplanned, that's hypothetical. That's still an unplanned act as far as the district is concerned.
That's correct.
Okay, and then that would still leave, just as I don't want to leave from this piece, but then that would still, should we say, okay, that's what accidents really include, that would still leave the question, if you will, of should incidents also be included in this? So that's which is really the question that Trustee Church started this conversation with. Dr. Nicolette?
Thank you for that, Mr. Perry. It begs a question for me about intentionality. So whether intentioned or not, let's just say that I do something very egregious and I push someone down the steps in one of the buildings. That's intentional, but it's still considered an accident by the school district.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Because the district didn't intend it. Am I correct, Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Okay. Did you want to reply on this? Okay. Okay, so we have a couple of things that we're looking at. Really, not a couple. We still have the one thing in the incidents piece, which is what Trustee Church was asking. Should that be included as well? Because it falls short of an accident. Yeah. Right, which is that I think that's the way you explained it as well, and that's what you found in your research. Using the example, maybe somebody didn't get hurt, but there was an incident, and therefore, do we want to minimize that piece? So it's still part of the conversation from that standpoint. You have some thoughts on that, Ms. Ellison?
I just was going to say that I think if it provides greater clarity to say accidents and or incidents, or accidents/incidents, and refer to both, we don't have any heartburn over that.
Okay, so let's look at if that's a Trustee Church.
I think I can make a motion.
Yeah, I was just asking for one, so go right ahead.
That staff be directed to add to accidents under safety 1A.
If I may, I'm going to stop. Really, what it is, one, we would direct the superintendent, but really, we don't have to say that staff be directed to add. We add.
I'm adding it right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Okay.
We add. So it's just, and you're just kind of so your motion then, sir, would be that we add. Boom.
Incidents. However, here's the rub. I think we could debate all day the definition of incident as was mentioned. So maybe we would ask staff to come back with a definition of incident, or we could do it right now. But that's the rub that I was kind of in my brain.
Well,
I'm going to suggest with regard to that we don't need to define every term. There are common meanings in terms, and now that you have captured both, which is accidents or incidents, I don't think we necessarily need to define them. Otherwise, you could end up being stuck defining every term in here. You got both of them, right? So I think you're good. And if I understand Mr. Perry's example, incident is included in accident. So one is lesser of the other. So I don't think you need it, but if you want it, we can do it. I just like to, in other words, I make a motion that we add
the word incidents after accidents or incidents.
Okay, you want to be more specific, or do we all follow that, where that would go on this piece? Let's see, where are we down to?
1A, to
Yeah.
minimize accidents or
Here it is.
incidents.
Thank you. Okay, on 1A. Okay. There's a motion on the floor that we include incidents appropriately on 1A. Is there a second? Okay, motion on the floor from Trustee Church, second from Dr. Nicolette. More further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Trustee Church, next, sir.
All right, let me move on. I may have missed it. Normally, the policy says the superintendent shall establish regulations. Is that in there and I missed it?
That has been deleted from section 5B because it's inherent in policy 9082. We've been deleting all references to that. as
Because
part of this.
9082 says that, which covers all
9085,
policies.
I'm sorry.
9085.
9085.
So there's, included in, it sounds like included in another policy, that statement is there. And so therefore it's not at the end of either of each one. So it has been there in the past, but that's part of the work to just make these as tight and shorter as possible. Because all the administrative regulations are established by superintendent and staff anyway. Counsel?
And let me just add, because I know this is going to create confusion, and I think I understand what Trustee Church is getting at. Unless the board wants to direct the superintendent to have specific parts in their regulation, and in that instance, then we do put it in the policy. Otherwise, Emily is absolutely correct. It's implied that she may create the regulation. Does that?
Yes, you are correct. That's where I was heading.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Okay.
And it's kind of funny because the next policy we're going to talk about, conservation, is like 6 pages, like tells you how to water the roses. This one's very vague. And so my concern in looking at other policies is the regulation. We don't want to micromanage, but we need to give the superintendent guidance. Who investigates these things? And the example that I think I gave in there is people might be reluctant to speak to legal because it's going to be, legal's not there to help them, legal's there to defend the district. And if I want to file, so again, the assault in the bathroom that allegedly occurred by the ping pong coach. If you said, we got to get to the bottom of this, the ping pong coach might be fired or disciplined, and the person says, no, I'm not going to cooperate because you're going to use this, I'm probably going to sue you, and you're going to, why would I cooperate with legal? My lawyer says don't do that. So normally, from my understanding, in some cases, depending on the agency, there's 2 independent investigations separate. The disciplinary, risk management, whatever you want to call it, and then, of course, legal has to defend the legal aspects. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that well, that we have an obligation to get to the bottom of it and make things right, but at the same time, legal has an obligation that we don't pay too much money, or if we're innocent, if there's a claim, if we can blame somebody. Legal has so many, the expertise in that. Does that make sense? And so my question would be, do we want to direct the superintendent to establish regulations, or do we want to put it in this policy, or not at all?
Go ahead, counsel.
Under our current process, the risk management team has an adjuster who goes out and investigates for that purpose, and then our team investigates for the purposes of whatever needs to be done. That's just common business practice from a legal risk management perspective.
So your question is, should we say in here that the board directs the superintendent to come up with the administrative regulations around? Is that what you're saying?
In other words, who, what, when, why? So there's a risk management incident. Who handles it? Who doesn't handle it? Is it confidential? Is it public document? It gets really confusing, actually.
Well, I will ask this then. Every time there's an opportunity for an investigation, do we say in every one of them, this is who's going to investigate this? If there's a violation of the policy? I don't want to begin to do so. Then now in every policy we have to say, if this policy isn't followed, then this is who was going. Right. Because there are inherently procedures in the district whenever a rule is broken or a policy is violated or something like that. And Otherwise, heck, we'll start adding a whole bunch to a whole bunch of these things.
I get it, Madam President, and that's why I'm putting it out there. We don't want it to be too vague. We need to give it some superintendent direction, but we don't want it to be misconstrued. A person falling off a ladder might be a memo. A person getting assaulted in the bathroom by a staff member is going to be a big investigation. And along those same lines, do we want a line in here to say something to the effect of, as required by law, if appropriate, incidents will also be reported to the proper authorities, Child Protective Services, the police, et cetera.
We're required to do that, whether you put it in here or not, because there's a state law. We're all mandatory reporters, so we would be required to report anything to DCFS or Child Protective Services in our jurisdiction, or law enforcement. That's how the statute reads, so oftentimes we'll report to our school police. I just would suggest that you got to have a little faith. We know what we're doing, and to put all of that in here seems, because there could be, first of all, the law doesn't require a reporting every time. The law doesn't require us to adjust things with an investigation. So I just don't know if it's necessary. We can always make it happen, but we have to follow NRS regardless of what's in here.
Okay, so is there a motion in there, Trustee Church?
No, ma'am.
Okay, all right. You have some other questions,
Sure.
concerns on this? Okay, sir.
Do we want to put in a comment? I don't think it's in here. Each employee is expected to assist in maintaining safe working conditions. So that's just a thought that I found from another one. Kind of puts the employee on notice, hey, you're part of the team and the value team. And along those same lines, something in the policy, employees who reasonably perceive a risk shall immediately report it to the risk manager. In other words, it fell off the ladder, why didn't you tell anybody? So those are two things for discussion.
I think we have something, but please go ahead.
Yeah, so in the first section 1A, we added a sentence that says employees, volunteers, students, families, and visitors are expected to know and adhere to safe practices while on district property. Does that attend to your first request?
Should we say something about reporting to risk management if there's a breach?
So I was going to come to that next, but does this meet your first need about the expectation of everyone to play a role?
I think it does, thank you.
Okay, and then in terms of protocols, like reporting within a certain time and still reporting even if it doesn't result in injury, those are all things that would be outlined in administrative regulations and procedures.
If I might, I'm just curious, I probably should have asked this before, is there a regulation currently?
We have a whole bunch of regulations.
All right. I won't go there. Does that address confidentiality?
I don't believe it specifically addresses confidentiality within risk management, but I think confidentiality is addressed in a number of other administrative regulations and state law.
I know when there's an investigation, there's a level of confidentiality, and that's probably included somewhere. Which is what you're saying. If someone reports something and there's an investigation, will they be protected, so to speak? Counsel, it's.
Do you want me to answer?
Please go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Yes, no, go ahead.
Again, we can't regulate or adopt a policy for every single thing that can occur. But in general, there is confidentiality that it just depends. NRS 239 could apply. For example, any investigation done by the Office of General Counsel is considered attorney work product, so it's confidential by law. Anything that's related to students most likely is going to be confidential, either because of FERPA or some HIPAA. Yeah, thank you. So but it really just depends. Employee issues, and I know you disagree, and respectfully, but employee issues are protected confidential by NRS 239. So it just depends on the circumstances. It really does. And then federal courts can order that we keep things confidential, or federal courts can order that we make things public, state courts as well. So it really just depends on the circumstances. It's a hard one to answer. I wish I could give you a better answer, but that's it.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, and I get it. When I went through this, these are questions for discussion, and I didn't have access to call Mr. Rombardo on the weekend or anything, so I get it. One question: who does the risk manager report to?
Brandon reports to me, Chief Human Resources Officer.
HR, and I kind of like that versus legal because again, it does keep it.
Well, they're different investigations as he
Yeah, a
spelled
little
out.
bit separate. And I think that's all I have, at least for now.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Church. So there was one change that we made on here, and that was to include incidents in 1A along with accidents. That's right, America, right? Seeing no other recommendations as changed, they're looking for a motion, if it is the pleasure of my colleagues, to forward this to a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. So moved by Trustee Rodriguez. Is there a second? Okay, so this means that we would be moving board policy, what's that, 7400? No, that's the next one. 7300 to a full meeting of the Board of Trustees and for consideration, and if approved, out for public comment and then further approval. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? Right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is 6-0. 6-0.
Madam President, who was the second?
The second was Clerk Manetto. I'm sorry. Thank you, America. I should have said that out loud. Thank you. No, it's okay. You got a cop perspective on some of that stuff.
Yeah, that was interesting.
All right, so we're moving forward on to agenda item 2.03. And just as I open this next agenda item, I want to welcome our new Deputy Superintendent to her first meeting of the Board Policy Committee, saying thank you.
Keogh.
Dr. Keogh. I just know her saying Dr. Keogh. We rode school buses yesterday together, so, so welcome so much. And then welcome, Mr. Ceci, your first meeting as COO.
That's right.
Good afternoon.
Okay, agenda item 2.03.
Yes,
Okay, wait. I was just welcoming you. I got to read it.
Pardon me.
That's okay. It's your first meeting. You get a pass. No, I was just saying welcome, and that's why you thought we were ready to go. 2.03, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 7400, Conservation and Sustainability, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And I welcome again Adam Searcy, who is our COO, and then we also have our Chief Sustainability and Conservation Officer, Dr. Geddes. Did I get close? Okay, there we go. Welcome, gentlemen. The floor is yours. Now, Mr. Searcy, thank you so much.
Okay, I just wanted to introduce Dr. Geddes. We've got a whole host of operations-based policies before us here today. We're going to talk about how to water the roses, and we're also going to talk about how to keep the bugs off the roses, but just not too terribly specifically. But you're going to hear a lot about general language cleanup, consistency, revisions, and some deletions from policy with the primary intention of moving those to regulations. So some of them are well-established, long-standing board policies, and others, like this one, are relatively new. So I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Geddes for the details.
Thank you, Jason Geddes. And really this one is more about a shortening up, as was requested, and a cleanup. So if you go through the purpose and the definitions and the policy, a lot of that was removing language and clarifying some pieces of language to make it a little more clear where it is. And I will say this was a first attempt. We had never had a sustainability policy before. So we did convene many members of staff as well as several environmental community groups who worked through this language and put a bunch of this language in. And when we brought it forward, again, it was the first attempt, so we tried to throw everything into this policy. So what you'll see after page 1 and going forward is we had the list of the district priorities and what we should be working on. Two things to notice there in sections 2 and 3 on the bottom of page 2 is really a principle from the board was that all staff needed to buy in and work on this policy. It wasn't just in facilities. It was something that we expected all staff to do. And then in 3, we actually, I'm saying you, directed the every school to develop a policy with the assistance from staff so that they had the waste reduction, reuse, recycling, etc. And then on number 4 on the bottom of the page, it was to make sure that students were part of the learning process, and wherever any teacher could put environmental sustainability into their curriculum, they should. I can go through these really quick on the next couple of pages. We did eliminate watering the roses. It used to be in there. But basically it's become a bullet list.
But we do water the roses, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to go on record. We do still water them.
It's just not it won't be in this policy.
Okay.
So basically, all the explanations behind each one, starting down there with B, with the clean fuel, all those definitions that are sitting there are coming out of the policy, and they will come back as regulations so that we have more flexibility and more clarity, and we can put more meat on it and make changes as necessary. And that goes all the way through page 4. And that goes all the way through page 5, and there's your roses.
Should we interject as we go
Please,
along?
if you have a question as you go, please, Trustee Church.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Back to the purpose. Let me get back to my notes. And I apologize for the delay. I kind of had misplaced this. The district accepts fiscal responsibility for these goals. I'd kind of like to see the word reasonable responsibility or reasonably accepts. Do you have a comment on that? I don't want us to be, well, you said you're going to, and this is going to be very expensive. You know, I'm a big environmental guy. I'm a big electric vehicle thing. We just voted for electric buses. But we can't accept responsibility if they're $2 million. So do you have a comment or maybe put in the word reasonable?
I would look at Neil.
Thank you. No problem. I think, you are the ultimate entity that decides the budget for the school district, so I think you decide what's reasonable. So just because you say, hey, we accept fiscal responsibility, you get to decide what's reasonable when you vote on it. So I don't necessarily know if you need the word. If the board wants it in there, it doesn't create any harm. It's just probably not necessary, because what you determine might be reasonable, Dr. Nicolette might think, well, I think it's this, and then eventually you're all going to come to some agreement on what's reasonable and on this budget line item. That would be my thoughts on it. I do see your point. So,
Okay. Looks like people feel pretty comfortable with it as it is, Trustee Church. Please, yes, go ahead. Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, Madam President. No, I love this. I think this is great. Thanks for bringing it. I just a question. You touched on it briefly, Dr. Geddes. Page 2, number 4, the curriculum. So is that a new addition? Would this be a formal curriculum that we would introduce into the classrooms? This is probably on the academic piece, but just tell us a little bit more what that could look like.
Basically, once we developed this policy and rolled it out, we sent it out through the superintendent's memo and to all the science teachers and English teachers and math teachers, and said, this is a policy. Wherever you can work it into your curriculum, whatever you're teaching, it's important to do so. So it was basically the trustees saying work sustainability into the curriculum of whatever you're teaching.
So it could be in the form of a math problem. It could be a form in some general discussion. So we're really talking high level here. We're not talking a formal curriculum on
Yeah, not a formal
energy
curriculum,
conservation.
and we
Okay.
didn't want to get into any teachers, get
Okay,
into
fair
their
enough.
curriculum.
That's-
We just trying to get them to work it into theirs. And it has math problems, literature has popped up on it. A couple of schools have done recycling programs, a couple have done lighting evaluations. So it's really, it's up to the school, up to the teacher. And then, as I mentioned, we had all the outside environmental groups help write this, and most of them have curriculum for the classrooms that work with the schools, help them develop that.
Thank you, Trustee Winberry. Trustee Church?
Yeah, that's an excellent, I'm glad you brought that up. Good catch. I guess my question would be, is the superintendent comfortable with that wording, that we're not creating essentially an unfunded mandate on the superintendent to have this?
Please.
I would want to consult with our chief academic officer and team, but at this point, I think it's general enough that I don't have a real concern over it turning into something different. But I will be honest, I haven't had that conversation, and I'd like to do that. But at this point, I don't have concerns.
Please, go
And
ahead.
then that does come back to the board, so we can always address it as a board. And just a grammatical, where it says on number 4, period, should that be period or a semicolon or a colon or a wiggly or something else? It says, the board hereby directs the superintendent to adopt administrative regulation to implement and maintain the purpose of the board policy, period, but then it has A, B, C, D.
Yeah, what council was just pointing out, which doesn't make sense, is that it's really under her purview to adopt the administrative regulations. So let's say, for an example, when she's had an opportunity to speak with staff on the academic side of the house about this, then they can develop the administrative regulations that say, yes, the board is concerned about sustainability and conservation. This is our policy in this, but they develop the administrative regulations around it, not us. So if like back to your first question, there's really nothing for her to feel uncomfortable about because she puts it in place after talking to the team based upon those things. So it gives all the flexibility to her and the academic team. And back to what Dr. Getty said, a pretty quick look on the internet for any teacher or educator who wanted to say, I'd like to pull a sustainability lesson into, I mean, it's in every subject out there. There are things that they can pull in, just as they do often as they develop their lesson plans and so on. Not curriculum, lesson plans.
And Trustee Church, I got my PhD in chemistry, so I don't know anything about grammar. So I will have to defer.
Please go ahead, Trustee Church. Oh, your light was just on. I say, go ahead.
I would just, again, I don't know if it's supposed to be a period because like later on it uses a semicolon.
Where are you?
Number 4.
So my office, we have standard language for this, and so I think we did a lot to this together as a team, and I will take responsibility for missing this little clause that I just typed up there. So if the board would do a motion to adopt the administrative regulation shall include colon, that's our standard language. I understand what you're saying. Thank you for catching that.
Okay, so how about you make that a motion, Trustee Church?
I make a motion under number 4 to replace the period with a semicolon. Is that the correct term?
No,
Just to add that statement in black. See the statement in black he typed in?
Including, correction. I make a motion that we, under number 4, add the administrative regulations shall include semicolon.
Colon. You were right the first time. Colon.
I just had my colon tip.
Okay, I can get behind a colon.
Okay, you can get behind the colon. Semicolon, not so much, but the colon. All right, we'll take that as a second. Trustee Mayberry, thank you for that change to a colon. So we can do a vote on this. Do we have any public comment on this?
No, Madam President.
Okay, while I ask, do we have any public comment on this policy
Madam
at all?
President.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, yes, Trustee Rodriguez?
Oh, thank you, Madam President. Just a quick question for number
It,
three.
it's just on this though.
Oh, all right.
So hang on, we'll get back to you just on this piece, and then we'll get to the next one. Okay. All right. So the motion on the floor is on number 4 only, with the colon. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. The record show it is unanimous, 6-0. And as we're working down here, we're going to go over. You're at number 3 right there, right, Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. For number 3, reading that the district property shall implement waste reduction, things of that use. I don't know if I know ML, but is that kind of looking at like ball fields going to like, AstroTurf, things of that nature, kind of getting away from like grass, things like that? Is that kind of what this is going?
It's really for them to develop a plan specific for their school. We put in the overriding board policy that you all approved, but Peavine Elementary versus McQueen High School have very different issues and requirements.
Right.
So we wanted to leave it up to school by school to kind of identify, and then we as board staff are there to help support and implement.
Okay, so like for instance, say a school like they have grass and they're using hundreds of gallons of water on their football field, and they want to look at going to AstroTurf. Are they able to like use like WC1 funds or whatever to try to meet this policy, or just?
I mean, sorry, Adam Searcy for the record. There's a variety of more common or different initiatives that sites use to try to address this. Whether it's less printing, less use of paper or recycling of paper, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. When it comes to water, probably the highest return on investment that we use most commonly is the use of the effluent reclaimed water. When you talk about the cost benefit between natural grass turf and the irrigation and maintenance associated with it in comparison to artificial turf and the long-term maintenance associated with it, which is significant. It's not as routine, but once every 10 years, complete replacement of artificial turf has generally been the life expectancy we've seen. So weighing that cost benefit, we have, for specific example, replaced McQueen High School actually has an artificial turf varsity football field, which we have replaced using capital funds within the last several years. There's a couple other examples of that, but generally speaking, that's not the lowest hanging fruit from a return on investment efficiency standpoint. That effluent reclaimed water is a much better value for the district overall.
And Jason Geddes, I just wanted to add on, we actually did a study in 2015 looking at the 5 biggest users of water, the high schools. And coming out of that, we had recommendations of best management practices as far as when you water, mowing, fertilizer, and we've been working with all of the schools to implement that since 2016, I think is when we put it out there. And then just a couple of years ago, for all the high schools, we put in the evaporative transpiration systems that will read moisture and it'll change the watering schedule. So if it's raining, if we get a cloudburst, the sprinklers will go off. So we know how important water is, and we're trying to manage it as best we can.
I need that at my house. I'm just saying.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Okay, good. Very good question. Please, Dr. Geddes, go ahead. You were taking us through we'd just gotten down 3, 4. We're getting to page 3. You're just taking us through and pointing out important things that we should jump out of.
And Trustee Taylor, I mean, basically everything there's a bullet item, and then we'll be working on the backup for each one of those. But it's just taking those all out. So we will be addressing water. It just won't be in this.
Mm-hmm. And the detail should be in the administrative regulation, not here. So it's good to clean that up and then as you learn more, as we find out more, you can make those adjustments, and it doesn't take us here. So, all right. So thank you very much. So we have had great discussion around this, and now looking for, if there's no further discussion, we already found out there's no public comment. Looking for a motion, if it is the pleasure of the board. Trustee Mayberry?
I can make a motion to approve the proposed revisions to, Board Policy 7400.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, it's a race here. It's like, oh, okay, we'll go to Dr. Nicolette. She's been a little quiet on that today. So, all right, motion on the floor from Trustee Mayberry and then seconded by Vice President Nicolette. Further discussion? All those in favor of approving Board Policy 7400, sending it forward to a forward meeting of the Board of Trustees, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. At the record show, it is unanimous. And I would just say your work in conservation and sustainability is so impressive. I absolutely love it when I get into conversations in the community about, so, well, what's the district? I love it. Well, I'm so glad you asked me that question. I mean, there's a list of things that we can really be proud of. And so thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work. You don't get to leave yet, but thank you. Okay. All right, moving on to agenda item 2.04, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 7420, performance-based contracting, specifically to update formatting, and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. Of course, this is for action. Back to our COO and our Sustainability and Conservation Officer. Gentlemen, back to you.
This one's a little more brief. I really appreciate you bringing that up, President Taylor, because this policy speaks to some of our largest initiatives to date, district-wide energy conservation projects that we have implemented via this performance-based contracting board policy. So this is some very specific public works contracting language in state law that allows us to avail ourselves of some unique contract structure that is then translated into policy. So again, I'll let Mr. Geddes walk us through the details. Thank you.
Dr. Geddes.
Trustees, I'm just going to have a little pride of ownership. The primary performance-based contracting law was written in 2003 by an assemblyman who's no longer an assemblyman. But
I was going to say, who might that be?
But anyway, coming out of that policy, in 2013, the state legislature decided to mandate that school districts look at it. So they created criteria. Most of what you see here is cut and paste from the Nevada revised statutes as to what they required us to do. And this one's, it is short. It's more of a cleanup. The definitions went from the last page to the front page below the purpose. And really, the whole goal of this and the reason it was pushed in 2013 and it forced every school district to adopt it was we were coming out of the recession and most schools didn't have budgets to do construction or renovation or fix HVAC. So this required the school district to look at it. We have a good change there in 2A in the fact that the NRS has changed a couple of times. So that $1 million cap and the 5-year cap went away. So just to keep it reversing to the NRS makes a lot more sense. But we actually, prior to passage of WC1, we entered into a performance contract where we hired a company to go around and evaluate every school and look at them for their energy, water, waste, and look at their usage, and then come back with recommendations. Fortunately for us, WC1 did pass. So we got the recommendations and we started implementing them on the pay-as-you-go basis. So the normal model is you basically finance the work and then pay it off with your energy savings. But we were able to pay for the work through the WC1 money, and then all the savings go into the general fund. And really, that's really the only big change here. Although, as Mr. Searcy said, we did enter into that performance contract. We invested just over $33 million. We went into every school in the district. We replaced every light bulb with LED lights. We got the mobiles more comfortable with control systems. I mentioned the water that we did. That was through that project. And the savings are more than $2 million a year as a result of that project. And then we keep working on it all the time. So we have a big data analytics system, the McKinstry contract, which you guys approved a year ago. And every 3 weeks, we look at our entire school district and see how we can save energy and save money. And really, that's it.
No, it really is. Before we go any further, any public comment on this one, America?
No, Madam President.
Okay, thank you very much. Just bring it back here for whatever discussion might be necessary. This is just a really continuation of the great work that's being done. And really we get a chance to see how, because we're fortunate enough to have WC1, it's allowed us to maybe do more, go further, and then also to save some general fund monies in some other ways as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Geddes and / Assemblyman Geddes / Regent Geddes. Just so all of that. All of that. Yes, Trustee Mayberry.
I was just because I can't believe it's been almost 20 years since you were in the legislature. That's incredible.
He was 12 when he started. He was 12.
He was 12.
Yeah.
And I know I had a full head of hair 20 years ago.
He's saying no. No, thank you for your work. You've been the champion in this for the state, and we're all better for it. So, certainly. Any other discussion? Otherwise, looking for a motion if it's the pleasure of the board. Okay. Thank you, Trustee Rodriguez. Is there a second? Second. Okay, second, Trustee Mayberry, moved and seconded on Board Policy 7420. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. It will move forward to a full meeting of the Board of Trustees. All right, we continue our work, the COO show. Agenda item 2.05, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 7450, Integrated Pest Management, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And we have our CEO, Mr. Adam Searcy right here before us, the doctor of so many things, though. Of so many things right here before us.
All right, good afternoon. I'll take this one, integrated pest management. This is how we keep the bugs off the roses.
Well played.
And there's little to see here. This is a relatively new board policy. We've, had various practices and internal regulations prior to 2019, but in 2019, the state legislature passed an assembly bill requiring that school districts adopt a policy related to integrated pest management. So that's what you see before you. This talks about a number of important tasks, but I think one of the primary takeaways is integrated into our training of our custodians. That's something that, much of this responsibility lies with our site SFCs and our lead custodians. Of course, we have central services, groundskeepers, and other folks who play a role in this, as well as principals. But making sure that any pesticides or herbicides that are used on any of our school grounds or facilities are used with proper training in advance and are used in their proper fashion, and that the use of such not only pesticides and herbicides are communicated to the community and the folks using those facilities, but rather language in that training and in this policy related to other means of pest management, right? So it talks about minimizing health and environmental risks and other ways to prevent the the proliferation of various pests, whether it's, weeds or animals, insects. I won't go through the details of these edits. They are truly just updates and simplifications and clarifications in nature, no substantive changes. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Seems pretty clear. Let's go for the public comment first, if we have any on this, America.
There is no public comment.
All right, thank you very much. Trustee Church, you see your light on, sir?
Just curious, so pests would mean weeds and things like that, as well as mice, rodents, marmots?
No people, right?
No trustees?
No people?
Like a trustee, we have to
Just
feed them
checking.
still?
No, there's a different term sometimes. All manner, spiders.
Right.
Yeah, all sorts of bugs and lots of weeds.
Seriously, did we want to define it to say weeds and or rodents?
Well, actually, definition number 1 refers to a strategy for controlling pests and weeds with minimal use of...
Yeah, I'm good with it.
You good? Okay. All right. All right. Seeing no further discussion, looking for a motion, if it's the pleasure of the board, that we continue to manage pests.
So moved.
There's a motion on the floor by Dr. Nicolette. Is there a second? Second, Clerk Manetto. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll see that at an upcoming board meeting. Okay, agenda item 2.02, and we know it's coming because he's moving into position. 2.06, I'm sorry. A discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 7500, Transportation of Students, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And our CEO remains with us, as well as our Director of Transportation, Mr. Scott Lee. Gentlemen?
I'll kick this one off. We've got 2 back-to-back related to student transportation and district vehicles. These are a little more long in the tooth. Obviously, we've been transporting students and having district vehicles for a long period of time. I'll let our Director of Transportation walk us through the details, though. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott Lee, Director of Transportation. So in these, there was really overall nothing significant added. It was mostly cleanup and taking things away. Where we see the definitions, there's no change to those definitions. They were moved from it's a formatting change. They were moved from the bottom of the document up to the top. And there were no additions on the following page either. Those were all language removals, redundancies, things that referred to documents that were either that were much lower. They were looking down rather than to the laws and everything that should drive this policy. So those were struck. Page 3, it's the same. Still removal of language, just some language change in light of changing to considering some better language choice. And the rest of the document, everything else is just lined out. It's just been struck. There's been some change on some standard additions that I believe legal has added. With the superintendent on section G, but it's really one of the most uninteresting change documents. It's
Okay, well, thank you for your honesty. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Let's see if we have any public comment on this.
We do not.
We do not. Thank you very much, America. Doctor, I have a couple myself comments and a question. Go to you first. Sure. No, fine. Go ahead, Dr. Nicolette, and then Trustee Mayberry.
It's very quick. So our current situation with our buses and the rotation schedule, do you see that that's in here? Okay, thank you. And please, point us to it, because I keep looking for, you're the expert.
Well, I think this is an overarching policy, and we can fit any legal method of transportation into it. I think it's, let's see, as far as spelling it out specifically,
I will, while you're searching, Scott, in the reg associated with this, it does define like the walk zones for each elementary, middle, and high distance. It also provides for a couple examples of exceptions where in the case of safety, for example, where transportation may be provided even though a student may be within a walk zone. That adds to the workload or number of routes required to bus those students. So it's always a delicate balance between providing as much transportation as possible versus the resources necessary to do so. That part of it is in the reg. I'm not sure if you found a passage here that really helps us define the level of service that we're struggling to achieve.
Well, and if I may, it's really and thank you, yes, the AR is more definitive as it should be. I guess I'm just wondering about the term extraordinary circumstances, which the regulations would define. But if you don't think it's necessary, you feel that it's covered in here, I'm just wondering.
I believe it's covered in here, even in the first section. I can see close and I can see far. I can't see in the middle.
I'm not sure what that's called, Scott, but I know we have insurance.
Let's try section 2. If you could scroll to that. I think that has some language in there that really helps guide the decision making that we're all struggling with as far as achieving our objectives with constrained resources. I won't read through it, but district may provide transportation. Transportation vehicles will be routed in a manner most efficient, things of that nature. Just policy level type of verbiage, not overly specific, but some guidance to signal our intentions, I think, is best outlined here in section 2A through E.
And that language in there is may transport because it's not required in the state of Nevada to transport general education students.
Right. Yep. Okay, Trustee Mayberry, then Trustee Church.
Thank you, Madam President. So I'll just preface this by saying, I think all of us bring our own perspectives and experiences to this board, and so some of the questions I may have, if they sound critical, they're not intended to be. And I want to preface. I know that we have a shortage of bus drivers. We can't be all things to all people. So the tone of my questions aren't intended to ask for more. They're just bad questions. So, but first, the definitions, real quick. Just again, as a new trustee, there's a motor bus and there's a school bus. Are they the same or are they different? Because
some of these were carryover. Well, all of these are carryover from the previous board policy, and I don't know where all of these laid out definitions when they came into this policy. I haven't seen all of the versions and evolutions of this particular policy, but essentially the difference between a bus and a school bus is the loading lights and the color of it. That's the main difference. There's a whole host of specifics that are involved with the criteria. I believe it's like 87 pages long of specs that need to meet school bus standards for Nevada. So, okay. Did that answer your question?
I think so. It seems kind of redundant to me, but
this might help if it may. There are a bunch of extra rules for vehicles that are made to be school buses, and that's what really a motor bus could be a coach bus. Could be, you go and you jump on the Greyhound or something. That's a motor bus, right? But and that's probably what you are referring to, Mr. Lee, that there are a lot of the lights and the color and so on, but a whole bunch of other to be a school bus. But, right now we know we've engaged in charters. They would fall under motor bus.
So what's a school activity bus?
School activity bus would just be a bus that's white. Usually they're not yellow. They're white. They don't have loading lights. They would drop off 4 activities. You can transport students in those 4 activities. It's not for a daily transport or a roadside pickup, but if it was for a field trip, let's say from here to Elko, you could use a school activity bus.
So we have school activity buses?
We have 2 small ones, I believe.
Okay, is
But
there,
those are over at.
okay, that helps.
Okay.
Is there a party bus?
Oh, stop. Asking, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There are no, for the record, there are no party buses.
There's no party bus, yeah.
Owned or operated by the Washoe County School District.
So let me ask you this, and I think this was a question that my colleague asked. I was a little distracted. Page 2. Yeah, page 2A, we were talking about this. The strikeout in blue district is authorized by the laws of the state of Nevada to provide safe and efficient transportation to eligible students. However, providing student transportation for general education students is not required. And so, again, I apologize if I'm being redundant.
It is not required.
Yeah, it's not required.
Special education students on IEP, but state law does not require general ed.
I understand all that. My question is, why is it being struck in then?
I have an idea as to why you may have chosen it, counsel.
Yeah, that was mine. I'll handle that. We have to, again, do whatever the law says. And down in 2A, that's why we use the word may, because we don't have to do it, so there's no... So it's redundant. So our goal is to get these smoother.
Okay.
And
So it implies essentially by...
Right.
Okay.
By May. So, yeah.
And that's my point. I know we don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Understandable.
Being struck out, I'm just wondering if people assume that we have to. But, okay.
So the may mitigated that, if you will. Does that answer that question for you, Trustee Maker?
I think so. I trust the guidance. So the heart of my question too is I've sort of reviewed this, and maybe this is more of an administrative policy. You know, when I think of our policies, I think of the what, and then the how is sort of the regulation piece. But and this just speaks to page 3, sections D and E. And again, I don't have any suggested changes here. I'm just simply asking the question so I can understand. We bus students to AACT. That's not their zone school. And is there a policy where we bus students to AACT? That's not their zone school.
That's older than me, per se. I mean, I don't know if that's spelled out in any particular policy, and maybe in an admin reg or something associated that had been added. I know that there's SWAS, for example, too. That's a much larger thing that we bus to. Or
this may help.
Large.
It is not a policy. It's more of an administrative regulation. Between the SWAS schools.
If that's the case, I'd like to see where it is, because if we're allowing that, I'm just wondering why we don't allow bus transportation to those students who are accepted to signature programs that are not their zone school. Again, I'm not suggesting we do that, but we have these policy meetings for a reason. Let's talk about the policies. We had somebody here last week who said that he had to transport his child to Demonte Ranch, lived out in Spanish Springs. They were accepted to their performing arts program down there. So we talk a lot about equity here, and it just kind of dawned on me. I wonder if there's an equity issue there. So
always has been with the signatures. Yeah. That's always been the issue, is the transportation for signatures. I remember shortly after I joined the board, there were actually a couple of board members and some staff members. We went to Las Vegas to look at their version of signatures, for lack of a better, but they have more AACTs, if you will. They have more schools that are like that, to see what are some of the things they were doing to try to address that issue, because it is definitely an equity issue.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that's my point. So that's the trepidation I have with. I think there's some shortcomings in the policy when it comes to transportation. Okay.
Okay.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe Trustee Smith has joined us too. For the records, we'll add that. That there.
Madam President, could I
Yes, please.
I do just want to acknowledge the equity concerns that Trustee Mayberry has brought up, and I would I want to make sure that Mr. Lee corrects me if I'm wrong. I don't think it's a lack of desire to provide that. I believe that we simply don't have the buses and the drivers to provide that additional level of transportation for students who are going. And this is something I have struggled with in every district that I've been with, and it's a tough one. But I'm guessing that it's prohibitive for us to do that, given our current. I just want that on the record, so that it's not that we don't want to do that.
I can actually go back further, if I may, from current from when we took that visit. And that's what was the net result of that visit is not having the resources, as in at the time it wasn't as much the buses. We have more buses now than we did then, but more so the drivers to be able to manage that district wide. It was much more that. So.
Yeah, no, thank you, if I may, too. And that's why I prefaced my comments the way I did. I'm not asking for more. If I know it's a problem, I mean, another, have a student on an IEP, gets accepted in your signature program. They're required to be, the IEP covers transportation, and
they will be transferred because of IEP.
Well, to their zone school, not to a school with a signature,
correct.
With a signature
Correct.
program.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't see that in here. And I bring that up because I know personal instances when those discussions occur, and I say, well, it's policy. It clearly it's not policy.
No, that's administrative reg. I can. That's why I said
Okay,
it is
if
not
it's
policy.
administrative rule, I'd like to see it because I couldn't find it. So, anyways, I don't. I just want to get that on the record. It was an issue that's important to me. So, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Mayberry. Trustee Church.
Thank you. Great discussion. Those are issues that I basically was going to bring up too. Dr. Nicolette alluded to some concerns about that, and then the superintendent just a minute ago for not lack of trying. So that brings me down to number 2B, where the district shall allocate and assign. Do we want to add the words again, because if we're not able to do this because of the lack of drivers, something to the effect as reasonable? It says we're going to do it, but we can't do it.
Well, like as of right now, when we're on the rotation, we're not adhering to that policy.
Right.
That's your point. So should there be some language in here to allow for that because we're outside of our own policy? That's your point, Trustee Church?
Yes, excellent. Well said.
No, you said it.
Yeah.
And it's certainly a valid point. And this. I have to be honest with you. In all my years on this board, I never imagined we'd be at a time when we weren't transporting all the kids. I mean, that's still a really difficult pill. I'm sure for all of us, it's really still a difficult pill. So the question is, should we allow for that in here or knowingly operate outside of policy, which is certainly not because anybody in this room wants to. I mean, there's no question about that. But to allow for that if absolutely necessary. Conversations, or you have a suggestion, Council?
May I add something?
Make reasonable efforts. Everyone see that? Let me read it so it's on the record. The recommendation is the district shall make reasonable efforts to allocate and assign to the schools the number of school buses sufficient to transport all eligible students to the respective schools. I would probably add, because this is probably more emotion than anything, honestly, should make all reasonable efforts. Just to go even further, we should make all reasonable efforts. That's turning over every stone and doing everything absolutely that we can.
I'll make that a motion.
Okay, thank you. Motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. Okay, Dr. Nicolette will make that a second. You see the recommendation on the screen. Let's pause for a minute. Oh, we already asked about transportation questions, so thank you. Any discussion on this thing? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? Okay, the motion carries. I'm looking at Trustee Smith. She was an I. I was going to say, as I just looked up, I'm like, ooh, I looked up too late to see your eye. Okay, got it. Thank you, Trustee Smith. That's 7-0. It's unanimous. Trustee Church, you have another?
Yeah, two more if I can. I'll try and be brief. So under 2A, almost the same thing. Did we want to give the superintendent a little bit of leeway and maybe adding a sentence or other options as may arise? In other words, we've kind of said this is how you'll do it, A, B, C, D, E. I'm not smart enough to think of some other example, but if one came up, do we just want to word it a little more vaguely?
What's your recommendation?
Or other options at the discretion of the superintendent? Or at the discretion of the district? I guess it would be at the district. We're using that term.
You have any concerns one way or another about that, Madam Superintendent?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was reading and I didn't catch it. I was trying to propose language for Trustee Church. I didn't hear that.
Would you repeat that? Go ahead, Trustee Church.
What I think we would, I'm just
2A.
asking if we want to be a little more, give the district a little more, instead of narrowing it down to those 4 or 5 options, in the form of district-owned vehicles, cash subsidy, contracted services, subsistence allowance, or other options for residing near public school. So subsistence allowance for residing near public school or other options.
Sure.
Again, we're looking for a recommendation. I will
Okay.
ask this, or subsistence allowance for residing near, somebody help me with that. For residing near a public school.
Yeah, I don't get that one.
Yeah, I am guessing that's some older holdover language. The one example I can think of is we do have students that are, no, that wouldn't even apply to that instance, actually. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud. I apologize. I'm unaware what that unless these guys know what that means technically, I don't know what that means.
It's a stretch. There's some language in the reg related to transportation by individuals. A little different. It's more pertaining to like folks that live near the state line and actually attend a school outside of our district because it's closer, and they provide their own transportation and we reimburse them for that.
That's exactly what it is. I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was thinking
Okay.
too. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just throw this out there, like kind of the way we've been going with this would almost imply we would actually strike that entire sentence. Just leave the first part of it. The district may provide transportations to and from school when it's clearly indicated to be necessary. Full stop. Reg and elsewhere is where the superintendent and staff figure out how to do that.
I agree.
I actually like that. If everyone follow that, the recommendation to strike that second sentence out of that paragraph, because again, that talks a little bit more to the how.
So
And
moved.
That's it. So we have a motion on the floor to strike that second sentence in 2A. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Motion by Trustee Church, seconded by Trustee Rodriguez. Discussion? Madam Superintendent weighed in. You said you were good with it. Go ahead.
So just
Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, President Taylor. So are we still speaking specifically to zone schools?
No.
Or are we just going to keep that out for flexibility for future?
Right, that second sentence doesn't even speak to zone schools. That second sentence simply, it really looks like it speaks to how the transportation should be provided.
Okay.
And by striking that, it removed, one, we're not the how, we're the what, sometimes the why, but it takes any parameters away that the superintendent could come up with.
Yeah.
Other discussion? Trustee Rodriguez?
Thank you, Madam President. Not so much on that. I just,
We're
I
discussing.
think we're discussing.
Well,
Not on this.
Okay, so we'll come back to this on this discussion on this motion to strike the second sentence in 2A. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Okay, the motion's carried. I got you, Trustee Smith. The motion's carried. Let the record show it's unanimous, 7-0. Okay, you said you had one more, Trustee Church?
One more, and I'll try to be really quick. 1C, it states we don't discriminate, and my only question, this may be for legal or staff, we do discriminate favorably if they have an IEP because we're required to. So does that reconcile with the fact that we do discriminate because we're required to? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't read that way. I don't think this doesn't, an IEP student may fall in any of those categories. It just says that the decisions on transportation will be provided without regard to those things. It doesn't say we don't discriminate. It says the decisions are made without regard to those. So any student with an IEP, without regard to all of that, will get those services that are due to them as a student with an IEP. I read it a little bit differently, but certainly open for. Okay. All right. Thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Rodriguez, you had a comment or two on this?
Thank you, Madam President. I'll try to be quick too. I actually kind of want to roll. I do kind of want to share the same concerns that Trustee Mayberry brought up as far as the school and the equity issue. I do have a question. How many buses are we committing to those students that get to those schools that they're not zoned for, to like the AACT and stuff like that?
For SWAS, I believe we have 3 buses for AACT. Those buses are transporting also Worcester IB. They're also transporting there. In the afternoon, I believe there are 7. I believe there are 7 in the afternoon.
Between all of them? Between the...
But for AACT.
ACT and IB?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean between all the high schools.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, between all of the high schools. But we're also transporting them at 4 o'clock. We're picking them up after other routes are done, essentially. So that's how we're able to do that with these shifts and times. In the morning, I would have to look it up on my computer, but I believe that there's only about 4 in the morning.
Okay, thank you. I just, just for record, I do share the same concerns. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Trustee Rodriguez. Did you have something, Counsel? You have something your mic?
I do. Yeah, I do. Sorry, I was
okay.
Getting text from my team. So Trustee Mayberry brought up a great point on the definitions, and so when we define things in a policy, we want to use those words in the policy. And when he mentioned motor bus, I thought, and I'm kind of the lucky guy because I can read very fast. We don't ever use it again. We don't use passenger car ever again. We don't use passenger van ever again. We don't use school activity. So we need to clean up the definitions on this.
That's true.
And so what I'm going to ask is that the board direct the superintendent to clean up the definitions, to pass this forward, but also with the understanding that it's going to come back with different definitions, and then our team will work with Adam's team to get these definitions correct, and you'll see an even cleaner policy. But we don't ever use the term
That's a good point.
Motor bus again. You can't do that. And
why
in the
define
future,
things we don't use?
Right. In the future, I'll double check that. This is why we're doing this process. We knew we had some holes in our policies, so this is one that needs to be fixed.
Okay.
So I'd ask for that.
We should have a motion to that effect, that the definitions be cleaned up to reflect only those things that we use and that are relevant to this policy, and those that are not relevant to the policy be stricken.
So moved.
Motion on the floor from Trustee Nicolette, Vice President Nicolette. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Trustee Mayberry. Seeing no further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay. Passes unanimously. I know we were still in the middle of going through the policy, so I can certainly, these are not related. These are my comments are more overall with a couple of questions. So have we finished going through those things you wanted to point out? I know we kind of jumped in the middle of this, Mr. Lee.
Yes, I have.
Okay, fantastic. The only other things I would say is we've had the conversation regarding equity and the situation that we find ourselves in. So I don't feel a need to go back to that more. I do know that everyone in this room wants to get all students to school that need to go to school, certainly want to do so safely, and we certainly want to make sure that those choices that we have for students to attend schools, that transportation is not a barrier. It's not a barrier, so there's more things for us to continue to work on. I will say this, I am so impressed with you and your team and the team of NHR and the holes that you have been able to fill in such a short period of time, and people that are already in. I was talking to one of your supervisors at Alice Smith when we were there the other day, and just how many bus drivers you have in the Pike who are being trained and all of that. Just a lot of tremendous work. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that that you've done, and we kind of turned the heat up. Okay, we came back, look, wait a minute, let's go back and do some more. We kind of turned the heat up, and I know that was a little unexpected, perhaps. So you turned it up, you leveled up, and that's what we needed, because we owe it to our children. And so I really appreciate that. I think that as we continue to look at transportation and making things equitable, and look at some of those things, I think we do have more, particularly I've had several people reach out to me regarding HUG and the walk zone and crossing McCarran, and I mean there's some issues that we wouldn't know were there until we get to the school and they're there, but those things are going to continue to come up as we take a look at them, and then you've been awesome at, okay, how do we need to resolve this thing? And I appreciate that. And one thing I also want to just remind the trustees and the public who may be watching or listening, that study that's going to come forth, that's going to help us. What's the best way to do this thing? Is there a better way to do transportation? Shoot, who knows? We're doing it the way we know to do it. But one, to say, hey, let's bring somebody in here that can help us take a look. Kudos to that, because there are many people that wouldn't do that. And then secondly, just ask the question, what's our timeline, do we think, on that, to look at, hey, how else can we add to the work that's being done, the tremendous work that you and your team are doing. I've met some great bus drivers over these past few weeks. For some reason, I run into them different places, and they're just some great people who just want to help our kids get to school. It's actually really, really, really good to see. Any idea timeline wise on that? On that study, I know we've contracted with someone, I think, right?
We did, and we did the initial before school to try to get some sort of program in place there. Mm-hmm. We did not get that, so now we have to. I'm going to meet with business before I meet with the contractor, and go over various scenarios beyond the start of school, and see if they want to pursue that, or if they would like to do something else.
Okay, I'm going to say back to you what I think you said, okay. Right? Is that we really kind of wanted to get something in place before school started, but we weren't able to turn it that fast.
Yes.
And so now it's like, okay, where there are some things are there some things we can do, even though school has already started, and then kind of so we can still take advantage of this opportunity and that expertise. Did I kind of catch it?
Yep. Okay. That's the gist of it. All of our efforts and all of their efforts were focused on the start of school plan. We've got that. The school's started. We need to look at different plans, different scenarios, different ways we can do things.
Okay, so we were able to use them. I'm sorry, we were able to use them for the start of school.
No, they did not. They did not produce in the time that we needed to.
Okay. Well, is there anything you need from us so we can assist with that in any way? The transportation issues we're going to continue to be here with us. And as much as we need to continue the work to get bus drivers, we just want to be as responsive as we can be. So please let us know if there are things that we can do so that we have windows and we can do the most we can to take advantage of them. And then, meet the needs. The needs are growing, and now I know that makes it tough. You're going to jump in, Mr. Searcy?
I would just, to respond to that precisely, I mean, your support and verbalization of our needs across the district, but specifically in this area, has been helpful. The applications and enrollees in the training program have been extremely encouraging. I mean, I'll just take the opportunity to at least describe the nature of the recruitment program as being very positive. We haven't talked about this specifically on the record since late July, and we are progressing on pace as planned for that post-fall break return to service. In the meantime, we have been able to put
I'm going to cut you off because I'm getting kicked under the table.
Fair enough.
Okay.
The optimization study, to your question,
Yes,
is not
thank
played
you.
out as intended. We're trying to get as much value out of that engagement as possible, but it is a rapidly developing situation, and since the start of school has already occurred, major changes to the bus routing is much more challenging than if we had concluded that engagement as much as 3 weeks ago.
Okay, that answers that question. All right, before I get into more trouble, I'm just going to say thank you. Neil is so funny. I can read you so much, man. Well, we appreciate that. Thank you very much. We're going to go on in the agenda, Council, to agenda item 2.06. 2.07. Ooh, we just did 6. Let me cross that out. 07, discussion and possible action.
Did we move this forward? I don't think we did yet.
Didn't we? Oh, we just did.
We have not. Oh,
Yeah, we need to move the whole thing forward, right?
correct.
We
We have
just
not done
changed.
the,
Oh, we just changed the one thing.
We just
Okay.
changed it.
the
Okay.
definitions.
Right, and then we did the definitions. That's what we did. So now we need to look at the entire agenda item 2.06. Okay, is there a motion on the floor to move forward the agenda item 2.06 as changed, as specified? Better. Moved by Trustee Rodriguez. Is there a second? Second from Clerk Manetto. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Yep, I know. I see. I look up. I see your hand waving. Any opposed? Okay, the record. Motion passes unanimously. Let the record show unanimously. Thank you, 7-0. Thank you. Now we'll move on to agenda item 2.07. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 7505, District Vehicles, specifically the update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And we see our same two gentlemen before us, Mr. Lee and Mr. Searcy. Gentlemen?
No introduction necessary.
All right, Scott Lee, Director of Transportation. Much like in the 7500, this is mostly cleanup. The language was removed for anything related to transporting students because that belongs in Board Policy 7500. So this was just district vehicles. And some language cleanup in formerly Section 2. It's same with Section 4. Just changing. It's just cleanup. On 4C, there was a change there. The student portion was removed, and that's because the other Board Policy 7500. So this is just pertaining to the vehicles themselves. G was just shortened, just condensed to drug and alcohol testing. And any reference to private vehicles was removed. That will be fleshed out in admin regs. And that's the rest. Most of it's just formatting adjustments after that.
Okay. All right. Any public comment on this, America?
There is no public comment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bring it back here to the table for any questions, comments, Trustee Church.
Thank you. I just had, this looks really good, very simple. Protocol, so it'd be 2D. Protocols related to involvement in a vehicle accident while in a district vehicle. Did we want protocols for leased rented vehicles, whether it's Hertz, but unofficial business, or private vehicles when we're being reimbursed?
Comments or feedback on that, gentlemen?
We do talk about in 2H, the use of private vehicles. These are all details to be outlined in an administrative regulation. So, D says protocols related to an accident while in a district vehicle, where H only refers to the use of private vehicles.
And there are guidelines for leased vehicles in the admin regs as well. So if it was not one of our vehicles, we could flush that out in there.
So you're recommending that we include that, then, Trustee Church?
Well, we could maybe just change H to say use of private vehicles, private or leased vehicles. In other words, that's for the superintendent to decide the protocol, but that could include whatever.
So if, or leased, because are there occasions when we lease vehicles? Rental cars, rental cars are
Yes,
leased? and so on?
there are
So-
occasions where we do it, yeah.
So is that a motion?
Okay, I make a motion to amend H to say use of private or leased vehicles.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? As you can see it on the screen, by the way. And then therefore the same rules apply, if you will. Okay, there's a motion on the floor that leased vehicles be included with 2H. Is there a second?
A second.
Second? Dr. Nicolette? Give people an opportunity to read that. Can you see where we are, Trustee Smith? 2H, bottom of page 2.
Yeah, I can. I guess I'm just trying to understand the inclusion of leased is because it's a personal vehicle, but that's being leased by the district. I'm just trying to understand this one a little more.
Trustee Church?
If I might, so for example, an employee goes to Las Vegas for a conference, rents a Hertz rent-a-car, is involved in an accident, we would still want to have a protocol for how to deal with that.
But isn't that different than a lease?
Yeah. I'm sorry, say again?
Isn't that different than a lease?
A rental versus a lease?
I actually thought of that, but I don't think there is.
Well, let me ask this. Do they all fall under private vehicles? Or is a private vehicle only mean my own private vehicle?
Good question.
Because if it's owned by Hertz, right, is that private as well because it's owned by Hertz? Is that considered? Because otherwise it's personal vehicle.
They're all private vehicles.
They're all private vehicles. Personal vehicle will be my car. Private vehicles will be a vehicle owned by a private party or business. Or is that? So it looks like they're covered under private vehicles, Trustee Church.
Well, so I'll withdraw the motion.
Yeah, and don't forget, as Mr. Lee pointed out, that this is just under the regs. So it would be incumbent upon the superintendent, obviously with our assistance, to draft regs that apply to these different circumstances. And I see Mr. Searcy taking notes, and I'm sure we'll make sure we cover rentals and leases and things of that nature.
And they could
put it all in the
to delineate
Yep.
the private if you want to in those categories. Okay, Mr. Searcy?
If I could, I just noticed in section now 1A, it basically defines a district vehicle as a vehicle provided by the district, whether it's owned, leased, or rented by the district.
Oh, so all of it falls under district vehicle then?
That's the
Really,
way,
based upon
that's the way
the
I
policy.
interpret this.
Based upon the policy, you're right, it does, it would. So it's covered in a couple of different ways. So either because it's considered private, or if the district has leased it or rented it, it's included as well.
It's a district vehicle.
So it's because under this, we're
I
calling
think
it
so.
because I guess for those purposes, it is a district vehicle during that trip to Vegas. So sorry you have to drive, but yeah. Because it's district business. Yep, very good. Good catch, Mr. Searcy. Thank you. Okay, other questions, comments on this? Dr. Nicolette?
Thank you. Employees are mentioned several times, so I really do get it. I just wonder if maybe the first time we could put it in 1A, district may provide employees, because this is definitely, without doubt, a policy for district employees only. Yes? Just, I mean, it's.
What are you, I'm saying, is that 1A you're saying? How would that read? Help us
It
through
would
that a little
read,
bit.
the district may provide employees a vehicle owned, leased, or rented by the district for transportation as appropriate, etc. If you don't think it belongs there, it's really not a big deal. I just want to ensure for future that this is totally about employees.
Does B do that for you?
Well, I would like to see it before B. Yes, it does, and it mentions employees elsewhere, but I guess I would like to see it right up front. And if there's a reason why it doesn't belong there, I'd like to know what that is. I mean, I know this is minute, it's just why isn't it in A and we waited until B?
Because A is about the vehicle.
It's also about providing a vehicle.
Right, providing a vehicle. And then B talks about that the vehicle is being provided to.
Okay, I can let that go.
In my mind.
But I'd like to
you
see it in A, if it's okay,
Well,
but
then
you're
just,
the expert.
Yeah, just if I mean, you can make a motion to that effect if that's what you'd like to see.
Would including employees in there, how would that, probably for legal, how would that work with volunteers? Are volunteers considered employees? They are fingerprinted, we do the background, they do have an ID, but then they're not under any payroll.
Allow
So
them to drive vehicles?
Sometimes.
Yeah. They submit all of their information, they take the required courses, and yes, we do.
Then I think that needs to be in the policy, because that's not there at all. The policy, for me, assumes these are provided to district employees only.
So are we considering the volunteers that go through all the background, they get the district badge, everything else, are we considering that for?
Do we consider them employees?
Do we consider them employees? Are they covered under our policies when they hurt themselves on a football field or something like that? Are they entitled to the same sorts of protections like that?
Well, that's
an excellent question.
Yeah, I would say this, as I know council's looking up where that line should be drawn. I think that I'm comfortable without employees et al. Being in 1A, but I do think that it needs to be clear, unless the other category, the volunteers and so on, those who are, again, they're fingerprinted, they get training, they have a badge, and so on, unless they're considered district employees, that this should encompass them as well.
My suggestion would be, let's just put it right up top in the purpose. And technically, trustees don't fall under employees, but you might rent a car, which would be a district vehicle. So we could just put, and I put it on the board if you want to see, through this board policy, the board authorizes the use of district vehicles by trustees, employees, and/or volunteers for district business when warranted and/or economically reasonable. I don't know if that's a problem for Mr. Searcy or Mr. Lee, but that's my suggestion. And then down below where B is at, we could just put the district requires all drivers to operate
vehicles in compliance
district vehicles in compliance. Yep.
That's even higher up than 1A, Dr. Nicolette.
I'm glad I asked the question. I had no idea that volunteers. Can you give me an example, just so I really can understand?
I can give you an example.
Okay, please do.
You have a sports team, and they have a coach, and then they have a volunteer assistant coach, and then they're going to rent vans and go play something in Sacramento, and so they rent a couple of vans. That's what came to my mind immediately. It's like, well, of course volunteers drive when. Yep. Okay. Other questions? Oh, so that's resolved. So let's vote on these changes here. We'll encompass them together because they're about the same thing. So we're looking at a motion. I'm looking to you, Dr. Nicolette, this should encompass your concern. The changes to purpose as well as to 1B. So that trustees, employees, and volunteers are included in the policy, and that it's clear that everyone is required to operate the vehicles in compliance with law.
So moved. That covers it.
Okay. So we're looking at the changes to the purpose and to 1B as stated. I see you, Trustee Smith.
Second.
Oh, there's a second. All right. All right, so there's a motion and the second to encompass those changes as outlined. Further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Let the record show that it is unanimous. It's those changes there to 7505. Other changes or recommendations to 7505. Good catch to make sure we include them as well. Okay, if seeing no others, then looking for a motion, if it's the pleasure of the board, of the policy committee, I should say, to approve board policy 7505 as changed and send it forward to a full meeting of the Board of Trustees. Okay, motion by the clerk Manetto. Is there a second? Second by trustee Mayberry. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? Right, the motion carries. Let the record show that it is unanimous. All right, continuing on, agenda item. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Thank you for all your work, you and your team. Great job. Agenda item 2.08, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or for the proposed revisions of Board Policy 7546, School Nutrition Services, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And Mr. Searcy, and this is our new Nutrition Services Director, and I forgot your name, I'm sorry. Help me.
Shirley Kukowski. Shirley?
Yeah.
First name, Kukowski.
That was the easy part, Shirley. I got that. Kukowski. Miss Kukowski, welcome back. Please, I apologize for forgetting your name.
No worries.
Turn it over to you.
All right.
Go ahead. This is the overarching board policy for nutrition services. There's a couple of related board policies. You'll see a lot of red here. Of course, the same reorganization and some language cleanup, some very strong shall language, but a lot of stuff that's being recommended for relegation to board policy, as you know, or pardon, reg. As you know, the nutrition program is very heavily regulated by the USDA and the state. So this is a little bit more squaring with that. I'll let Shirley walk us through the details. It just occurred to me, I thought we were done, and then I realized this is like procrastinating on your homework or something on the agenda. You've got one more after this.
We
Sorry.
do, you know what, and I'm going to do this for just a moment. I'm sorry, we've been at this for can you guys want to take a quick 10-minute break? Everybody good? You want? Oh, okay. We'll cut it in half. 5 minutes. No. We're doing it on mine too. That's why I asked. And then Ellen walked out, and I looked up. And I'm like, oh shoot! It's like Katie Simon Highland boot camp. Okay, she's doing boot camp. All right, we'll take a 7-minute break. How about we cut it in half? 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Please forgive us. I just looked up. We've been just grinding. All right, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have just a couple more items. Legal counsel was pulled away for legal questions, so we can go crazy. No, I'm kidding. So we're going to... like when mom and dad are gone.
I need to object to that.
Right, when mom and dad are gone. Daddy's gone, you guys. We can go crazy. Okay, no. Sorry, I had a sip of caffeine, and that's all it took. That's all it took was a sip. That's all it took. It's downhill from here, y'all. All right, so now I'm in charge of the computer. Ooh, look at this. Look at this control. Woo-hoo-hoo. Where'd the boss go? Okay, but we're gonna make this happen. If we have any legal questions, I know they're watching us upstairs to make sure we don't violate the open meeting law, which we don't want to do. But if we have any big legal questions, we'll put them on pause, and then we'll be back in about 10, 15 minutes or so. And we'll just keep moving on from there. So thank you. I'll go ahead and go back and reopen this agenda item. Those of you already before us, agenda item 2.08, discussion and possible action. This is about board policy 7546, school nutrition services. And before us is our new COO, Adam Searcy, and Shirley Kukowski. All right. Back to you now. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. So as Adam mentioned before the break, we are presenting today a lighter version of policy 7546, school nutrition services. In addition to some of the formatting, cleanup, and typos correction that we've identified, our goal really was to streamline some of the content and language that doesn't add any value to the policy, and remove some of the language that we feel should be included as part of a regulation. So on the first page, we did move, much like some others, the definition from the bottom of the document to the top. We also, on page 1 in the policy section, removed item number 2, as you can see. Am I looking at the same thing? Yes.
Looks like you removed item number 1.
Number
correct?
1.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
On page 2, we are keeping item number 2, 3, and 4, which are really important to us, obviously, to keep a school lunch program available at all schools, as well as breakfast at all eligible schools.
Okay, I'm going to jump in just a moment. Madam Superintendent, you have a question here?
Yes, thank you, President Taylor. And Ms. Kukowski, I briefly shared this with you. My question is around, I'm just a big proponent of children eating.
Right.
And I'm not making light of it. I mean, but this is like feeding them is essential. And I recognize that while lunch is mandatory, that we provide breakfast overall is not. My question is around the wording of a breakfast program should be available according to the need, understand that, based on title, CEP status, and desire of the individual schools. So does that mean that even if I do not have a large concentration of Title I eligibility and I'm not a CEP school, that I could say we want to provide breakfast for our kids?
So, okay, now this was just brought up. It is something that we'll need to probably look into. But
and I'm not trying to put you on the spot,
No,
but that was just my question. So
no, I understand, and we do understand that there's a bit of maybe language clarification that needs to happen here.
Okay.
And like I mentioned, maybe mentioning the fact that it's at all eligible schools. And
I'm happy
and removing
to
the desire aspect of it.
Okay, I'm happy to follow up after this, and we can talk it through a little bit. I just want to.
Absolutely, but it is a great point, and for the record, I'm also a big fan of feeding people. Clearly biased.
All right, is that a motion? We don't need a motion. Neil's not here. I'm not sure. We don't need a motion for. We'll tell Neil when he comes back. We made a motion that we want to feed kids. So good.
The lawyers use the term stipulate.
Oh, stipulate. Yes, stipulate that we want to feed kids.
Everyone's in favor.
Yeah, it really is. Go ahead, Clerk Minetto.
So I suppose we could just eliminate and desire.
Right.
We can just.
Well, she's going to follow up and see that it may be the case that if you're a school that wouldn't ordinarily fall within those guidelines, but you're a principal, right? The building administration says, hey, we really want to feed kids, and we have a lot of kids that we think will take advantage, maybe those gap kids and so on. They may be responsive to those. We just don't know if that's in alignment
What if
yet.
it goes the other way? If a principal says, no, I don't want to feed them breakfast, I know because I know that there's a need, these children are starving, but.
Right. So if on the other hand, say I'm a principal at a title school, and but the principal is like, you know what, that's just too much work, or whatever the case may be. So there should be a difference maybe should be made between the two, right? Because I think the intention on this is that if your school has the need, really based upon, then you will have a breakfast program, and if you have a desire. Hopefully, and that's the part we have to pay attention to.
Right.
So that whole thing needs to be looked at. This just really looks like the new number 3. The new number 3. I know. Should I be typing something? No, just put a question on it. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
I understand what is being asked, and I will look into it.
Thank you.
We voted to feed kids.
That's good.
No.
Sounds good to me.
No, we do have a question. I was just about to highlight it. So would you want to? No, we have two things came up. One is the superintendent wants to see on the new number 3. She was asking for clarification, and Ms. Kukowski is going to find out if there's a school who perhaps they aren't a title school or a CEP school, but they want breakfast. Would this mean that they can get it because they have a desire? On the other hand, Clerk Minetto brought up what if on the other end of the spectrum, and we certainly hope this is not the case, but that there is a title school, and they have a high need and so on, but the principal's like, you know what, that's too much work, or we aren't going to feed the kids. You know what? So really, the intention, from what I'm hearing from the conversation from the board, that if you're qualified and there's a need, you're having breakfast, and then the separate issue is finding out if a school, maybe they don't quite meet the letter of the qualification, but they have a big desire, and Ms. Kakowski's going to figure that out. So really, that might need to be the two concepts in there that we need to kind of clarify.
Okay.
So I don't. Do we say that differently so that the two are? So there's really two ends of the spectrum. Superintendent?
Is there a way, Neil, to just somehow make a notation there that we need to revisit just this one piece of wording?
Yeah. So let me suggest kind of similar to how we did similar to how we did the previous policy related to the definitions. And I asked, hey, let us work on this. So perhaps we try to get this passed and move forward with a notation that will come back and address this issue.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I was just working on something else. So I can just put a notation on there and we can do it.
I think it's pretty clear what the direction, the desire of the board is that either end of those are taken care of. So it seems like we're comfortable with that. So
Okay.
do we need a motion to that effect?
I think you should do a motion to that, yes.
So what we're looking for then is a motion that we ask the superintendent between she and her staff, to take a closer look at the new number 3 on this agenda item, and that when it comes, should it move forward to the board, then it will the clarification that we need will be stated at that point. And the first step is the board, so we can jump back into it at that time. Okay, motion on the floor from Trustee Rodriguez and the second from Clerk Manetto. Do we have any, by the way, any public comment on this one?
There is no public comment.
Okay, thank you, America. Okay, seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Okay, I got you, Trustee Smith. No opposition. All right, the motion passes, and let the record show it is unanimous. So we'll go ahead, Ms. Kakowski, let's go ahead and continue.
Thank you. So we are also adding line number 6. The board hereby directs the superintendent to adopt an administrative regulation to implement and maintain the purpose of this board policy. Right. And then the rest of it is also a lot of clarifying language. We are removing the language around 5600, the wellness policy. We feel like, again, this fits in the student wellness policy. And it doesn't really go in that. Let me see. So one of the main changes after that, you will see on page 3, we are recommending to remove the entire cost of meals section. Again, as it would be better fitted in a regulation. So that's all the content that you will see from cost of meals from 1 to 5.
I would just jump in and say that makes a lot of sense, especially these last few years with the federal regulations around free lunch for everybody, and then the state jumped in this year too. I mean, it's just to go back and forth and back and forth. The administrative regulation is much more nimble to be able to do that and reflect it accordingly.
Yeah.
Trustee Rodriguez?
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt, but I was looking through this, and I know Trustee Mayberry and I visited your facility, which is phenomenal, and I know you provide, I think it was over 2,000 after-school meals to students. Is that not covered in this at all, or am I totally missing it?
That's another item that I believe belongs into the admin regulation.
Or is that a administrative reg?
It seems like, if I may, one, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And if it's something, is it something that's kind of considered an extra? If it is an extra, then it's kind of more of an admin reg. Versus if we as a board are saying we will provide.
Right, because those are vended meals that we partner with the food bank or.
Okay.
So it's not under the same regulations.
Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Yep. Go ahead, counsel.
Well, I know you passed a motion, but if we might be able to just, I had some time to think about it, look at that paragraph 3 again. I think we could reword it such as, and I don't know if this meets your intent, but let's try it. A school breakfast program shall be available according to the need of the individual schools. A school breakfast program may be available according to the desire of the individual schools. So meaning this, if it's needed, you get it. If a school desires it, they reach out to the superintendent, and the superintendent says,
To nutrition services, and
right,
maybe they get it, maybe
right,
they don't.
Is that bad? No, that doesn't fit.
I think we just need a moment to confirm the current state of practice.
Oh, I didn't.
I do like to mirror Section 2. A school lunch program shall be available at all schools. A school breakfast program shall be available at all eligible schools. And then I was leaning more towards what we did with regards to transportation, putting some like particularly emphatic language. Right.
Okay,
right.
we'll work on it.
But if we're currently not structured financially to provide breakfast to schools who are not technically eligible, I don't want to imply that we can provide it based on their request.
Yep. Yep.
But first, we need to establish exactly what we're squared away to do now. But it'll be something along those lines.
I think the current the motion we made is the one that sounds like the best place to land. Yeah. Okay. Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, Madam President. It's good policy. The only thing as I read through it, I'm wondering about the nutritional value piece. Is that noted somewhere?
Wellness policy?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh, it's in the wellness policy?
I'm sorry.
In wellness regulation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I guess my question is where's the I mean, we follow USDA guidelines, right? Are there nutritional guidelines? Are there a nutritional value breakdown of breakfast lunches that we're required to provide?
Yes, those are in the wellness regulation.
Wellness regulations. That's where. Okay.
Correct.
So board policy 5600.
Is it there?
Yeah, I see that now. Okay. Well, district. Okay. Well, that's dealing with federal civil.
Oh, it's down in the reference section. Makes sense.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments? We made one change, really one direction to the superintendent regarding the new number 3 that we see here. Otherwise, I don't see anything else. So looking for the pleasure of the board, of the policy committee, in terms of moving forward board policy 7546 as revised, or as stated, really. Okay, we have this side of the table is hot over here with motions, and they're hot. You guys got to wake up over here. Okay, even Trustee Smith is she even got in on the action, and she's on Zoom. Okay, we'll take this motion from Clerk Manetho, and then the second from Trustee Rodriguez. Further questions or comments, discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition. All right, got your hand. Opposition. All right. The motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. So staff will work on that piece.
Thank you.
Through the superintendent, and then we'll go from there. Thank you, Ms. Kukowski. All right, yes, and we did, before you came in here, we did vote to feed the kids.
Hashtag
just
feed
so.
kids now.
Yeah, hashtag.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You're okay with it? Yeah. All right, agenda item 2.09. 2.09, let me read it. Homework. This is our homework policy. Homework. Okay, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 6154, homework, specifically to update the formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And Dr. Parks, I'll turn it over to you and co. Thank you, Mr. Searcy.
Thank you, President Taylor, and greetings, Superintendent Enfield and Board of Trustees. For the record, Troy Parks, Chief Academic Officer, and yes, I have today our Director of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction, Jenny Anderson, and our Director of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction, Kendra Fox. They are the experts in this area, so they're here and available for any questions that you might have. So just jumping back to the spring where we brought many academic policies to you, this was the one that had several questions. We have met in small group meetings and had discussions. So I wanted to provide you the updates. We did, as from the past, we've removed all the language that is hard to quantify, might be considered squishy, such as effective homework practices, strong partnerships, meaningful homework. So we've really condensed this policy down. Want to point out at our last meeting and when we came to you, we added some language that Neil put in for us, and that is on the first page, and it looks like it's under policy 1A, provided clarification. Homework's going to provide reinforcement and extension of class instruction and serve as a basis for further study and preparation for future class assignments. That was added, I believe it was in April. Then we also have added on page 3, part B, Roman numeral 4, and that's the mechanism or systems to communicate and review homework assignments. So when you look at part B, that is essentially outlining what would be in the regs. So we're not going to go over the regs today because obviously the policy has to be passed first, but in the regs we would address the responsibilities for teachers, admin, grading, how we might go about including it, appropriate time for homework by grade level, and those are the discussions that we had in the small group briefings. So we would, of course, run those through Superintendent Enfield after the policy's passed. So we're available for questions regarding the policy, and this is Homework Policy 2.0.
It is. Thank you very much. Let's go to any public comment on this one, America.
No, Madam President.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's bring it back here. Thank you for the work done after the conversations back and forth and groups and so on to really reflect, some of the comments and concerns from trustees and those from the community. So it's been a lot of good work from all three of you on this. So looking to the board, if there are any questions, comments, or if there's a desire of the board. Oh, I was used to her hand. I can't really see that yellow over there in the corner. I see it now. I'm leaning in. Last time she was like this. So, okay, questions or comments? We'll go to you, Trustee Smith.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Parks. I appreciate the work done on this policy, and I find it largely to read well. I know we like to suggest specific wording, but before we do that, I do want to engage Superintendent Enfield on a couple questions and Dr. Parks, because the one thing that I don't see in the policy is the ability for administrators to make site-based decisions about homework, because although I very much like these evolutions, the fact remains that homework itself is not executed the same way based on individual principals making decisions or even teachers within grades. And I think that that's fine. So I know we were tabling this whole conversation around homework, including modern data and research within our own district and in best practices across the country around homework and outcomes, waiting, of course, for Dr. Enfield to join us. So I was curious more about that before we go ahead and pass this policy, because I know that this was part of a larger conversation that Dr. Parks had wanted to have with Dr. Enfield. And then my second question is, and I don't know if this would be administrative or policy, but I was thinking of suggesting that we add something around the choice to assign homework falls within each school site, because in reality it does, and I do feel that that's important to reinforce on a board level.
Thank you, Trustee Smith. Questions, comments? That goes to some of the conversation we had before. You have any thoughts on those? We did have some conversation. Dr. Parks, we'll start with you. We did have some conversation before you got here, Madam Superintendent, so we'd love to hear from you as well. Yes, it was spirited conversation. It was spirited, yes. Dr. Parks.
Yes, and thank you for the reminder on that, Trustee Smith. Had many conversations around the research and findings behind homework and the purposes. And what Kendra's going to share with you is kind of a decision that I think we've almost made. We got to run this through Dr. Infield, but we felt like that level of direction was going to be in the admin reg. So that is something that we took out of policy. And in the past, it's been in the policy that it's been at the site, that the site-based decision-making was where you would form your site's homework policy. And we're bringing that forward in the admin reg.
Good afternoon, Kendra Fox for the record. It's kind of hard to see in the policy, but right under the words policy and then guiding principles is crossed out. We did have there the decision to implement a site-based homework policy is designated to the school principal, and I think, Mr. Rombardo, correct me if I'm wrong, you recommended we remove that because of directing site principals was a problem in a policy. Was that? Am I remembering that?
If I remember correctly, it was the board can't direct what principals can do, only the superintendent.
Identify yourself, Ms. Anderson.
Sorry, thank
That's
you.
Okay.
Jenny Anderson, for the record, Director of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction. So yeah, I recall the same thing, and it was that the board can't direct the superintendent, or the schools rather, on what to do. However, you can direct the superintendent. So the wording was changed to say the board does not mandate homework. And it says, however, if homework is given to students and gives more of that information, and then we follow up with the regulation to support those specifics.
And then also I would add that in the reg, right now it does have the principal facilitate a site-based homework guidelines at the site. So it does say that right now in the reg, and so that's part of what the principal would do at the site.
Okay, now I will, before I go to the superintendent, go back to Ms. Anderson. Where did you read that line when you said the board? I'm trying to follow it. It's
So if you're on page 1 of the board policy, and it is right underneath definitions, and the next section is policy.
Is that first blue?
And I'm seeing it, under that number 1, and there was a bunch crossed out.
Yeah,
See
I
it?
see it. In my mind, I had the whole thing crossed out, but I see that. See that last
Yeah, it's kind of
sentence right
hidden
down
in there, isn't it?
Yes, got it. Got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, President Taylor. And I think this is, Trustee Smith, I believe this may be, I hope that I'm interpreting your question correctly. Please correct me if I am not. But I think it begs a question from me to the team here. How are we ensuring through this policy and the corresponding regs some consistency across the district, so that if I'm sending my children to Principal Rodriguez's school and they're coming home with 6 hours a night of homework, and I have another child who's going to Principal Mayberry's school and they're coming home with no homework. Exactly. Well, we know who Principal of the Year is going to be, so that's all. That's
Depends upon who's voting, right?
And I want to be clear. I'm not. This is not a micromanaging intent question, but I am hearing questions around consistency in things like this, and homework has become such a topic of conversation. And I can just speak because I think Trustee Smith was also trying to get at what my philosophy on homework might be as an educator, and so as a high school teacher, I, assigned homework as it was needed. I didn't feel that I needed to earn a badge for being the teacher that assigned the most homework. I didn't feel that giving students homework for the sake of homework productively impacted their education. It was clear that if they had a project, we would have steps along the way for them to do. And so, I'm interested in knowing how we might have some consistency, or at least some parameters maybe, and if that is somewhere in here.
If I can just jump in a little bit, part of the spirited conversation we had at a board meeting before, which is part of what some of the conversation is coming from, was around that very thing. Consistency or inconsistency. I believe this was a big point that you brought up, Trustee Rodriguez, with 2 children and having 2 very different experiences. And also schools are different and demographics of schools are, all of that and where that balance is. So this just really kind of jumps into where I think all of that was shared with staff in the small groups and other conversations that were had, which is kind of how they landed here, so that it isn't something that comes from the policy per se.
Right.
But it's something that you manage internally in the administrative regulations, realizing that you balance all of those things, and you're in the schools daily, and it's sometimes situations are different, and some kids have this situation at home, and this all of those things that you have to manage as the educators doing the day-to-day work. So that kind of brings us back to how we ended up here without a direct statement on that per se, and then really allowing it to be dealt with internally, with including what happens at the site level. So I tried to kind of summarize that spirited conversation we had during that time when we talked about, then also, some of the recent research on the value of homework depending upon situations, all of those things. So, Trustee Minetto?
Thank you, Madam President. And I was wondering, I don't like homework. I'll just say that. And there are just lots of reasons. I know research says this and research says that, because we can pick whatever we want. And I understand the school's kind of decision, because the principal of that school and the teachers at that school can know if it's going to be done or not. I think it's really hard in a 24-hour town in the city we live in, and parents having to work so hard right now just to keep housing, and I don't know, but I don't know if every child in the world is self-motivated. So do we have any data that says homework is just so good? I mean, I can see taking work home you didn't get done in class, but do we have any data like that? Thank you.
Yes, we have meta-analysis, which is the data of the data. And so here's what I would say. We have the effect size, which for our sake just means like what impact does homework have on student learning. It's not great. Do you remember exactly what it was, Mrs. Anderson? It's not real good. But
God bless you.
But here's the thing. When you think about, and I'm just speaking from the chief academic officer point of view, if we were to have a policy that said homework isn't a good strategy, we're not going to do it, then we have conflict with our AP courses, our other advanced placement, our GATE department, oftentimes in SWAS, they're going to have highly motivated students who we're going to inhibit them being able to do homework, and they're super motivated and they want it, and they want that engagement. So the reason we went, and Kendra can even share more of this history, to a site-based decision-making was that we have schools that traditionally you're doing homework and you're going to do a good amount of it. And we have some other schools where there's the students may be greater impacted and there might not be a place to do homework. So we really felt like the middle ground was to be able to work through it at the site and make the best decision for the community that you serve.
Thank you, Ms. Fox.
Hi. One of the things that we did try to do, though, in the regulation was to, if you were going to assign homework, here's some boundaries, so a box, so to speak. So a little bit what Dr. Enfield was talking about a project and how things should be layered. When we went to the balanced calendar several years ago, we noticed that schools were suddenly giving tons of homework over fall break. So we added some information about how homework should not be given, extended homework or projects should not be given, just over fall break, and have them do that Monday, because we were hearing those kinds of stories from families, that that unfinished work could be sent home and things like that. So we did try to put some boundaries in the regulation, time bound. I think it's 10 minutes per grade level, that kind of information. Elementary, it's not graded. It only goes into the student learner responsibility category. So we put, and then, as a high school teacher myself, one of the things I heard a lot about was giving homework credit for back when we covered our textbooks. So we give credit for that. And so we try to put those things in that's not homework. That is something else. And so
something else.
We tried to really put some guidelines on it to try to make sure that if they were going to sign homework, that it was done in an effective way that didn't impact kids negatively, and or at the elementary level, if they didn't turn in their homework, they weren't losing recess. So things like that. And Jenny might want to expand.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, thanks to you both. I think Trustee Rodriguez, I saw you first, and then Dr. Nicolette, and then Trustee Mayberry.
Oh, wow. Save the best for last. This policy. Thank you, Madam President. No, I meant the policy. Sorry.
I knew that.
It's a long day.
Too much fun.
No.
Yeah. Second day of school.
Right.
All right.
So is it Administrator Rig 6124 that is homework? It is okay. I'd like to see a copy of that. Is that online or? Okay, I'll pull it up. Okay. So kind of just getting back to where this all began. I guess yes or no? Is there some sort of consistency? Because I know that was the biggest thing. From Incline Village to Gerlach, I feel like homework and all this stuff should be fairly fair throughout the district. And is there something that does that or states that?
Ms. Anderson?
So the real answer is probably no. If we're going to be as transparent as possible, what the policy suggests is that we want sites, and we met in small group and talked about the why, going from a very affluent neighborhood and the expectations in that school versus going into a school that has a lot more need and around-the-clock needs in any of the schools. We talked about student activities. We talked about children taking care of other children. And there's a lot of things that play into homework that look different than when we grew up and what homework looked like in our lives. So that's part of the inconsistency. I think the consistencies we have is the recommendations around don't overdo it. That we've got to look at a certain number of minutes. When we talk about a kindergartner, we're talking about 15 minutes of homework. And that includes, can include things like reading. That includes looking at letters. That can be driving home with your kindergarten student and looking at stop signs and identifying letters and talking about things like that. And our great kindergarten teachers know how to try and pull that out of their students and their families. And so I think the idea of, are we having our youngest students or our elementary students sitting there for hours and belabor homework? In most situations, no. In some situations, that might be happening, and I, having come recently out of an administrative role in a school, I would venture to guess the administrators are taking care of that when they're aware of it. Because we have a lot of work going on with the work that we're doing around PLC across the district and talking about consistency between classrooms and assignments, and the work we have going forward around grading, where we're going to be talking about what does it look like in classroom A and in classroom B and in classroom C. So I caution against us spelling it out to such a tightness that it becomes an expectation around a decision that feels right today. When we think about the last 2 years, if we had a policy in place around exactly what homework had to or didn't look like, I think we would have really been hurting ourselves. And we're in an interesting time, and there's a lot of, you talk about research, there is a lot of recent things around these extra additional activities and this recovery time that we're in that I think we need to be aware of before we go anything extreme and put something really in writing around it has to look like this. But the regulations, I think, do honor that to some degree in saying, be aware, think about the time limits, and don't have it be something that's detrimental, especially at the elementary level. That's the lens I'm speaking to. Don't have it be detrimental to that student's grades or what shows that they're a successful or not a successful student.
Thank you, all three of you. Trustee Rodriguez? I mean, clearly it's not what you want to hear,
No,
but I think it's certainly easy to understand, and when you put it that way, as you said, really well said. Ideally everyone gets exactly the same thing, but we know in the district that talks so much about equity is really about students getting what they need to have the opportunity to have equal opportunities to be successful. And that's what you're looking at is what you're talking about is allowing site administrators, along with the teachers in the classrooms, to determine what is it that they need in the situations, because the fact of the matter is our district is just so different.
Oh, and I do hear that, and it's very well received, and that's really well said. I still go back to those blended families where they got a kid in 5th grade here and a kid in 4th grade there, and there's one has 2 hours of homework, one doesn't, and that's
It's
where
tough.
it is. And I understand what you're saying, and as much as I like the idea of leave it to the principals and area soups and superintendent, but there's families out there that are feeling this. And it's, representing North Valleys to Spanish Springs to Gerlach to Oregon, it's very diverse. So I'll just say that.
If it's fair for me to say, I think the other piece I would add is, again, with the focus that we have right now on collaboration amongst our schools and amongst our leaders in our schools, I think we're going to continue to see more opportunities for consistency. I mean, the true work of PLC helps guide that in a way that's very unique and very special. And through the work of our area superintendents and their direction and their focus around the collaboration and the alignment, not just across schools, but vertically as well, I think that these conversations become more relevant. And again, the work we're going to be doing around grading going forward, it's going to lend itself really nicely into these kinds of topics. So while we're not there yet, I hope as a member of the Office of Academics, we're going to see it coming and get a better wrap on it.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll go around Dr. Nicolette and Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you. That was very eloquent, and I think this policy is well written. I think it's thorough. It's to the point as a board policy should, and I do believe the work of consistency is just as you said, is really lies with the principals and the teachers and the students and the parents. And when we have inequities such as homework assignments, it is really very important for parents to have those discussions with teachers. That's really, I believe, where the difference is made, not here in this policy. I mean, if we want to add the term consistency, I'm okay with that, but I think that's almost impossible to define, and it doesn't belong in a policy. It belongs with the implementers and the people that are doing the daily work, the grassroots. So I would like to say that I think this policy is very thorough, and thank you for your cleanup. I appreciate this.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Trustee Mayberry, and then Madam Superintendent, let's hear get the chance to weigh in, please. And see how that yellow kind of blends in with that? See?
I don't see it.
See, there we go. I see the hand now. Okay, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, President Taylor, and thank you for letting me go ahead, Trustee Mayberry. I do want to respond. I think this is an appropriate time to share, and this might help Trustee Rodriguez sleep a little better tonight. You know, when I laid out my entry plan for the trustees in the community, I talked about the 4 C's, right, that are sort of going to be our guiding theme. And that first C was coherence. And what I mean by coherence is how do we operate as a school system, not a collection of individual schools. But that doesn't mean that we are directing or micromanaging or becoming cookie cutter at all. But it means that as a system, we're operating in a way that does allow for more consistency, predictability, regardless of where you go to school. Now, how do we get there? Well, and spoiler alert, this will be in your highlights this week, but nothing here. I am actually having the area superintendents shift to report to Dr. Parks to really get at a lot of what we're talking about. And that's because the work that our area superintendents do in supporting our principals has to be grounded squarely and primarily in excellent instruction in our schools. And so housing them under academics so that they are around the table with the extraordinary directors and team that we have here, having these conversations and then going back and meeting with their principals as a group and having those conversations, I think is going to help us move forward more as a strong system that is better aligned and hopefully has a little more coherence. That's the goal. So I'm not saying that changing reporting structures is the magic, the magic beans that are going to get us there, but I do think that it helps and it sends a signal that academics are the core of what we do. Well, children are the core of what we do, but we have a responsibility to educate them. And that's what our public wants from us. And so Dr. Parks and I are going to be working in the weeks and months ahead with our area superintendents to figure out how can they best support our principals as instructional leaders. So when we move forward, and I agree this is excellent work has been done on this policy, when we move forward with these policies and the regulations, we can get it right. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Dr. Enfield. Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, Madam President. I don't think I have too many, nothing profound. I guess my when I read this and when I studied it, my first thought was, why do we need a policy on homework, really? And so, but there's been a lot of good dialogue here. I appreciate a lot of the words that you've said. It really has helped me bring some clarity and crystallize it. So I'm happy to make a motion.
Well, we have a couple more comments if we can get those
thank you.
first, and then we can certainly go back to. We'll go to Clerk Minetto, and then we'll go to Trustee Smith. Oh, you did? I thought you had your hand up. You had your light on earlier, didn't you?
I did. I still do, but I turned it down.
Okay. All right. It's okay. Well, Trustee Smith.
Thank you. I really appreciate the expertise of the district staff here. So thank you so much to my colleagues and to everyone for presenting on this. I love the use of these terms, systems, looking at it as a whole. This really alleviates a lot of the questions and the concerns that I had. The only thing that I'll add, and that I hear, I know it hasn't been explicitly said, but something that is core to me, is that in some of what Superintendent Enfield touched on, which is that we're really using student outcomes as our guide, not so much what people are used to doing or how much homework a parent or a teacher is used to giving, that we are really focused on what the data is telling us, what best practices are telling us, and how we want to grow as a system. And I'm very, very happy with that. And so I just want to say thank you very much. I am one of those people that did request the small group meetings. I love the work that's been done with this, and I very much appreciate the rigor of the dialogue among all my colleagues. So in other words, I like the policy where we are, and I appreciate everything that's been added.
Thank you, Trustee Smith. I don't know that we went through all of it. I know we started asking questions I think those are really the poignant points. So do we have any public comment on this?
We do not.
Thank you, America. So we've had plenty of conversation. I'll go back to, you wanted to make a motion, I think, here, Trustee Mayberry?
Well, given that it's homework, I'm not sure I want to make the motion now. I might be the most hated trustee in the school district. But,
you already asked, so it's out there now. He said we saved the best for last. I mean, shoot.
Well, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the policy for homework. Thank you.
Second. There's a motion on the floor from reluctant motion on the floor from Trustee Mayberry, and a second from Dr. Nicolette. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. That the record show it is unanimous. Thank you for the work on this. I think you heard enough comments. I didn't have anything new to add, but I think it's getting closer to where we want to go and trying to balance the needs of, we all went to school when everybody got homework. That's just what you got. It's just what it was, and so. Whether you liked it or not. Yeah. There's no question. We are reminded all the time. These are different times. So, thank you for your work.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. So now we have any closing public comment?
We do. We received one via email from Joe Morabito, and then Jeff Church.
Okay. Welcome. You're speaking not as a trustee, but as a community member. So welcome, Mr. Church.
Thank you. I am going to be.
Let's get your mic on. Get your mic on, sir. America, can you help? Let America get it on for you. We already started your clock. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I'm going to be very brief. First of all, thank you for finding my car keys to my classic car. This regards the drug policy. We're speaking at a policy board, so this is on the drug policy. JTNN 2022 Comprehensive Prevention Plan, Washoe County, is out. Have copies if anybody wants it. I have a 3-page handout to put on the record for the board members, and so you can read it yourself, but in case we ever do want to re-look at the drug policy, now you've got some updated stats. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Church. All right, so this then concludes our policy meeting. You got through your first meeting, Dr. Enfield, first policy meeting. Our next meeting, September 20th. Thank you, Council. Thank you, America. We are adjourned. Thank you for jumping on, Trustee Smith.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.